A cold hush lingers in the restricted vault, the kind of silence that seems carved into the stone walls themselves. The air is unnaturally still, as if the room is holding its breath. A thin beam of white light cuts across the darkness as the heavy steel door groans open. A curator in linen gloves steps inside, his heartbeat echoing louder than his footsteps. He moves with the reverence of a man entering a sanctuary, not an archive. On the table lies a long, cloth-wrapped object, unnaturally dense for its size. Sweat gathers on the curator's brow as he slowly unravels the fabric. What emerges is not parchment, nor clay, nor metal. It is a slab of deep sapphire, dark as midnight, yet shimmering with a blue that feels almost alive. As the final fold of cloth slips away, the slab catches the faint light and fractures it into ghost-like streaks along the vault ceiling. The curator stiffens. The stone is warm. He angles the slab gently, and something impossible happens. Beneath the glossy surface, faint lines begin to glow. A constellation of Greek letters etched in lines so thin they look like strands of moonlight frozen in crystal. They flicker with a soft luminescence, as if waking from centuries of slumber. The curator's throat tightens. The first line, half buried in a swirl of sapphire grain, reads, "In the beginning was the light." It is not a verse from any known gospel. It is close, too close, to something familiar yet unmistakably altered. Every scholar who has glimpsed this opening phrase has described the same thing. A sense of déjà vu layered on top of unease, as if the stone itself is rewriting memory. Under his trembling fingertips, the curator feels shallow grooves. These are no crude scratches. The letters have the precision of a master jeweler's hand. Yet the inscriptions are deeper than any chisel should allow, as if the words were not carved but grown inside the stone. Years earlier, when rumors of a blue gospel first circulated in hushed academic channels, most scholars dismissed the idea outright. A gospel carved into sapphire sounded like myth, alchemy, or another medieval forgery. But now, standing before this artifact, doubt feels childish. Nothing about the slab is theatrical or exaggerated. Feels ancient, heavy with purpose. A small group of experts gathers behind the curator, their faces illuminated by the stone's unnatural glow. One of them, an elderly epigrapher with trembling hands, leans closer. She murmurs that the lettering resembles 9th century Byzantine uncial script, but more disciplined, more deliberate, as if crafted by people who believed every stroke carried cosmic significance. Another expert, a geologist, runs a laser scanner across the surface. The readings spike in ways she cannot explain. Natural sapphire should be lightless, opaque at such thickness. Yet this slab, not polished, not thinned, allows letters to shine through like embers trapped beneath river ice. "Impossible," she whispers. The curator swallows and carefully flips the slab. The backside is smooth at first glance until the angle shifts. More letters emerge from the darkness, glowing faintly as if stirred by motion. But these lines are sharper, deeper, angrier. The phrasing twists into warnings, almost pleas. Scholars later debate whether the shift in tone reflects the hand of a different scribe, or a hidden theological tension that Byzantium fought to suppress. On the table beside the slab lies a small leather dossier. Inside is a history of the stone's troubled path. An anonymous donor, a coded note claiming the artifact was taken from beneath the northern apse of Hagia Sophia, and a final cryptic line, "One page is missing." The experts stare at the final photograph in the dossier. It shows the slab resting beside a hollow imprint in the soil where something once lay. Another piece, smaller, shaped like a rounded rectangle. The missing page. The curator overlays the image with the slab now before them. The edges match perfectly with the indentation. The gospel was never meant to be a single stone. It was a codex. Multiple sapphire leaves bound together by gold hinges long since torn away. The room grows colder as the scholars absorb the realization. Someone asks the question everyone is thinking. Who would carve sacred scripture into sapphire? And more importantly, why? Least of all in Byzantium, where the cost of a single palm-sized sapphire could fund a monastery for years. A slab this size would have bankrupted several noble families. Only an emperor could commission such a thing. Or someone above even him, someone with the authority to bypass earthly economics. The curator's gaze drifts back to the glowing inscription. Each letter dances like fireflies trapped under glass. The slab seems alive, restless, as though aware that human eyes have fallen on it again after more than a millennium underground. He whispers, almost involuntarily, "What were they trying to protect?" The epigrapher answers with a tremor in her voice. "Or what were they trying to hide?" A faint hum rises from the stone, so soft the scholars think it might be imagination. But the lights overhead flicker, just once, as if the stone has exhaled. Someone steps backward. Another begins recording every inch of the artifact. Cameras click. Scanners whir. Yet the scholars cannot shake the sense that they are intruding upon something sanctified, something not meant to be awakened. One of them recalls the donor's last message, "Do not let it be silenced again." Outside the vault, the wind howls through stone corridors. Inside, the slab glows brighter for a moment, illuminating dust motes swirling like constellations. The curator closes his eyes. For a fleeting second, the blue light feels warm, comforting, like the memory of a candlelit chapel. But when he opens them again, a final detail makes his breath catch. Near the lower right corner, faint but unmistakable, lies a symbol no catalog ever recorded. A small, circular seal, 3 lines radiating from a central point. Historians will later argue its meaning, but in this moment, everyone in the vault senses its purpose. It is a warning, or a signature, or perhaps an invitation. And beneath that symbol, barely visible, lies a thin crack, fresh, sharp-edged, impossible to date, as if the stone itself is preparing to open again, revealing something deeper still. A gospel that should not exist has resurfaced. And the greatest mystery is not how it survived, but why it returned now. Hadrian was no ordinary emperor. From the moment he ascended to power, he was a man who walked the tightrope between brilliance and obsession, between vision and obsession, a ruler whose mind seemed to stretch further than the boundaries of the empire he governed. Unlike some of his predecessors, who sought to expand Rome's borders with relentless conquest, Hadrian turned inward, captivated not by armies or lands, but by ideas, art, and the architecture of human thought. He traveled extensively, from the rocky cliffs of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, collecting not just knowledge and treasures, but experiences that shaped his worldview. Everywhere he went, he left traces of his curiosity, and everywhere he went, he observed, carefully, quietly, as if measuring not just the land but the hearts and minds of those who walked it. But beneath the cultivated elegance of his public persona, Hadrian harbored a private side few could comprehend. He was meticulous, almost compulsive, in his attention to detail, from the alignment of columns to the patterns of water in his fountains. Yet it was his obsession with secrecy, with the unknown, that truly defined him. He was fascinated by what lies beneath the surface, by what can be hidden in plain sight, by the idea that the mind itself could be a labyrinth as intricate as any villa or palace. He trusted few, confided less, and built layers of protection around his innermost thoughts. To Hadrian, the world itself was a puzzle, and he intended to control both the pieces and the solution. Hadrian's personal life mirrored his architectural endeavors. Deliberate, controlled, yet filled with unexpected depth. He was a lover of men and women alike, a patron of the arts, and a philosopher at heart. Letters and accounts suggest that he engaged deeply with poetry, rhetoric, and history, often debating with scholars for hours on the subtle nuances of morality, fate, and the weight of legacy. But these discussions, though public in some respects, hid a more intimate dialogue, conversations he held with himself through his designs, his writings, and his secret projects. Among these, the most enigmatic and perhaps the most deliberate was the hidden chamber he constructed at his villa, a room that would reflect the private fears and obsessions of the emperor in ways that no public document could reveal. The chamber was more than a hiding place. It was a reflection of Hadrian himself, a physical manifestation of his mind's complexity. Historians have speculated endlessly about its purpose, offering interpretations as varied as the artifacts found elsewhere in the villa. Some argue it was a sanctuary, a private retreat where Hadrian could escape the burdens of power, meditate, and commune with his thoughts. Others insist it was a repository for dangerous knowledge, containing scrolls or relics that challenged Roman orthodoxy, perhaps even evidence of secrets so potent that exposure could have destabilized the empire itself. And yet, no evidence has survived definitively to prove any theory, leaving the chamber suspended in the realm of speculation, a mirror reflecting the emperor's intellect and secrecy alike. What is indisputable, however, is the precision with which Hadrian approached the construction of his villa and, by extension, the chamber. Nothing was left to chance. Every curve of the corridors, every twist of a stairway, every reflection of light across marble floors was calculated, not merely for aesthetic appeal but for effect, for secrecy. There are accounts of rooms that seem to shift in perception depending on the time of day, of corridors that appear longer or shorter depending on the angle from which they are approached, of fountains that create the illusion of movement and sound where none exists. These architectural choices suggest that Hadrian understood the power of perception, of misdirection, of controlled revelation. And it is precisely in this context that the hidden chamber takes on its most haunting dimension. It was designed not merely to conceal, but to challenge, to guard, and to communicate in ways only Hadrian fully understood. Hadrian's obsession with secrecy extended beyond stone and mortar. He surrounded himself with a circle of confidants whose loyalty was tested daily, whose knowledge was carefully compartmentalized. Some accounts describe sudden disappearances, letters that vanished mid-delivery, and instructions so cryptic that even the most trusted advisors could scarcely comprehend them. The emperor's mind was a labyrinth, and he trusted few to navigate it safely. Scholars have noted that such measures were unusual even for rulers of his time, highlighting Hadrian's acute awareness of human ambition, jealousy, and betrayal. The hidden chamber, therefore, was more than a physical structure. It was a psychological safeguard, a way to exert control over knowledge, power, and legacy itself. Yet for all his meticulous planning, Hadrian was not without emotion. Letters to his lover Antinous, as well as reflections recorded by contemporaries, reveal a man capable of profound affection, deep sorrow, and intense longing. These emotions were not expressed in the public arena, where politics demanded calculation, but in private spaces, in architecture and personal correspondence, and perhaps within the secret chamber itself. Could the room have been a shrine to memory, grief, or loss? Could it have contained the remnants of his personal attachments, safely preserved from the public eye? The ambiguity only adds to its allure. In the end, Hadrian's secret obsession was neither entirely noble nor entirely sinister. It was human, an extension of a mind that sought to master the world, yet feared the vulnerabilities that mastery could not eliminate. It was in this tension, between genius and paranoia, between openness and concealment, that the hidden chamber found its purpose. It was a sanctuary and a puzzle, a vault and a mirror, a place where the emperor could confront his own mortality and the fragility of knowledge. And as centuries passed, as the empire rose and fell and the villa sank slowly into obscurity, the chamber remained untouched, waiting silently for those who might one day rediscover it. In the stillness of Hadrian's villa, where shadows cling to the walls like memory, one can almost hear the emperor's quiet insistence that some truths are not meant to be revealed lightly, that some knowledge must be curated, protected, and hidden until the world is ready, or until the right eyes arrive. The chamber, in its silence, beckons, it challenges, it dares, and it reminds us that Hadrian, more than any emperor before him, understood the power of secrecy, the weight of mystery, and the indelible mark one life can leave on the fabric of history. Long before the Byzantine world carved its empires into marble and gold, sapphire already carried a reputation that bordered on the divine. Ancient peoples looked upon the deep, shimmering blue of the stone and believed it was a fragment of the heavens themselves, a sliver of sky hardened into eternal crystal. It was impossible not to think this when holding a sapphire up to the light, watching it swallow shadows and release only a soft, celestial glow. Kings wore it to legitimize their rule. Priests wore it to declare their purity. But no one revered the stone more fiercely than the Byzantines, who believed sapphire did not simply resemble the heavens. It was the heavens, condensed into something that human hands could touch. In Christian iconography, blue was the color of divine truth, the cloak of the Virgin, the hue of revelation. A sapphire was said to strengthen the voice of the soul. Some mystics even believed that if a man stared into a flawless sapphire long enough, he could glimpse currents of divine wisdom moving beneath the surface like silent waves. The stone had power, symbolic, spiritual, and some whispered supernatural. Yet sapphire was extraordinarily rare in the ancient world. The largest deposits lay far east, in the lands of Kashmir and Sri Lanka, making the journey to Byzantium perilous, expensive, and often deadly. Only the wealthiest rulers could afford to possess the gem. Most people saw it only in mosaics or distant relics encased behind glass and gold. And so the idea of carving words, let alone scripture, into such a stone was unthinkable. To inscribe a sapphire was to challenge the natural world, for sapphire resisted every tool but the hardest diamond. This crystalline structure fought against intrusion. It was built to endure, not to be shaped. But the Byzantines were a people fascinated by endurance. They dreamed of crafting texts that would outlive fire, rot, war, and time. And sapphire, with its indestructibility and celestial symbolism, offered a promise no parchment could match. Whispers of a book of stones first appeared not in imperial records but in the journals of itinerant monks. These monks traveled long distances between monasteries, carrying tales and rumors as precious as relics. One such rumor spoke of a secret workshop in which artisans attempted to carve sacred verses into sapphire tablets, believing that divine truth deserved a vessel as eternal as God himself. Another rumor, more unsettling, claimed that these artisans were not craftsmen at all but mystics. Men who believed a message of enormous consequence had been revealed to them in a vision of blue light. They feared that parchment could be burned, scrolls could be hidden, and ink could be scraped away. Stone, however, could not be erased so easily. If the vision was true, if a message of divine origin had truly appeared in the form of radiant blue wisdom, then sapphire was the only medium worthy of containing it. For centuries, scholars dismissed these stories as symbolic exaggerations or pious legends, until fragments of unusually engraved sapphire began to surface across Anatolia. They were small pieces, no larger than a thumb, but each bearing faint traces of Greek letters. The letters were impossibly precise, cut with a skill that far surpassed normal stone engraving. They looked almost melted into the stone, as if light had burned them there rather than chisels. And the blue, always the same deep, mirrored blue, never faded, even under centuries of dust and decay. That consistency troubled historians. Natural sapphires varied widely in color, but these fragments seemed to match perfectly, as though they had once belonged to a single enormous piece. When modern gemologists examined them, they found microscopic grooves consistent with early medieval stonework, but also something else. A thin layer of residue clung to the crevices. It tested positive for oils used only in Byzantine anointing rituals. Lands outside Byzantium had no record of using such oils. The fragments were not foreign trinkets. They were unmistakably Byzantine in origin. Suddenly, the old rumors no longer felt like fantasies. The missing pieces of history began to suggest something immense. A codex carved not from parchment but from sapphire, pages of luminous blue inscribed with teachings unlike anything preserved in conventional scripture. A work that would require immense wealth, immense secrecy, and immense conviction. A project so ambitious it bordered on madness. Yet madness was not foreign to Constantinople. This was a city where emperors launched theological campaigns as fiercely as military ones. It was a city where truth and power were inseparable, where a single phrase could topple a patriarch, where visions and miracles were treated with the gravity of political treaties. In such a world, the idea of forging a sapphire gospel becomes less absurd. It becomes inevitable. If the truths inscribed within the stone contradicted imperial doctrine, then the slab's very existence would have been a threat. If the gospel suggested a different path to divinity, one found not through authority but through illumination, then the codex might have been considered too dangerous to reveal, and so it vanished, buried, hidden, sealed away beneath layers of war, fire, and fear. But not before its legend ignited a trail of stories spanning centuries. From tormented monks who claimed to hear the stone hum at night, to soldiers who believed it could glow in darkness, to merchants who smuggled fragments across seas, the Sapphire Codex lived in the shadows of human memory long after its pages disappeared from sight. And now, as modern scholars examine sapphire fragments and ancient manuscripts with tools far beyond anything Byzantium possessed, a pattern begins to emerge. A timeline, purpose, a message. The blue that defied empires may not have been a metaphor. It may have been a gospel, one carved in stone to survive the silence of 1,000 years. Emperor Theophilos stood on the balcony of the Bucolian palace, the winter wind pulling at his crimson cloak as he gazed over the city that had worshipped him, feared him, and judged him in equal measure. The morning light washed across Constantinople like a river of gold, but Theophilos's eyes were fixed not on the gleaming domes of Hagia Sophia or the vibrant bustle of the harbor. His thoughts were buried far below, in the secret chambers where knowledge was hoarded like treasure and guarded like a curse. He was a man of contradictions, a paradox made flesh. The last great iconoclast emperor, known for shattering holy images yet privately obsessed with the mysterious and the divine. His court remembered him as a fierce military ruler, but behind closed doors he was a lover of poetry, science, and forbidden texts. He feared superstition but craved revelation. He denied the sanctity of icons but spent nights studying ancient manuscripts by lamplight, hunting truths he could never publicly acknowledge. In this fragile balance of faith and power, Theophilos cultivated something the empire had never seen before: a clandestine intellectual order known only to a select few. They were called the cryptoscribes, scholars chosen not for their loyalty to doctrine, but for their ability to keep secrets that could reshape heaven and earth. They worked in silence. They wrote in code. Their existence appeared nowhere in imperial records. And yet, their influence seeped through the cracks of history like smoke. Most served voluntarily, drawn to the emperor's urgent vision. Others were compelled into service, scholars whose brilliance bordered on heresy, men and women who had delved too deeply into mystical theology or ancient sciences. Under any other reign, they might have been imprisoned or exiled. Under Theophilos, they were given a single chance at redemption. Use their knowledge to serve a purpose they would never be permitted to understand fully. Each was sworn to secrecy under penalty of death, and more chillingly under penalty of erasure. In Byzantium, to be erased from records was to die a second, more permanent death. The cryptoscribes met in hidden rooms beneath the Magnora Palace, where torchlight flickered against marble walls and the air smelled of parchment, ink, and fear. Their tasks varied: translating obscure Syriac gospels, copying fragments of ancient Greek cosmology, analyzing strange symbols brought from distant monasteries. But there was one project whispered among them that none dared discuss openly. A project so sacred, so dangerous, that even speaking its rumored name felt like handling live flame. It began with a single fragment of stone brought to the emperor by a trembling monk who had traveled for days without rest. The monk claimed it came from a monastery in Bithynia, a place where the walls whispered at night and where the brothers refused to sleep alone. He carried the fragment wrapped in wool, terrified it might glow or speak or burn through the cloth. Theophilos did not laugh. He did not dismiss the monk as delusional. He studied the fragment for hours in silence. Carved into its sapphire surface were 4 Greek letters, so delicate, so impossibly perfect, that no ordinary tool could have made them. Under lamplight, they shimmered with a faint internal radiance. When Theophilos touched it, the stone pulsed with warmth. From that moment, the emperor changed. He summoned the brightest scholars of his court. He summoned gem-cutters capable of feats whispered about in guild legends. He summoned mystics who walked the thin line between revelation and insanity. And he commanded them to investigate the fragment, to trace its origin, to understand its purpose. Weeks turned to months. The cryptoscribes worked tirelessly, comparing the stone's script to every known gospel and apocryphal text. None matched perfectly, yet all seemed faintly echoed in its message. It was as if the stone sought to rewrite familiar truths into something older, purer, more luminous. One evening, after days of sleepless study, a scholar approached the emperor with fear in his eyes. "This is no fragment of ornament or reliquary," he whispered. "It is a leaf, a page." Theophilos asked the only question that mattered. "From what?" The scholar bowed his head and replied, "A codex, a gospel in stone." The emperor's breath stopped. He understood the implications instantly. Such a work, if real, would bypass scripture controlled by the church, challenge the authority of patriarchs, and threaten the fragile balance between imperial power and spiritual doctrine. A gospel carved into sapphire would survive fire, flood, rebellion, censorship. It would survive time itself. It would be unalterable, indestructible, eternal. Rumors say that Theophilos ordered the cryptoscribes to search for the remaining pages, even if it meant trespassing into forbidden monasteries, bribing hermits, or raiding ancient tombs. They traveled through the empire in secret, carrying wax-sealed messages, extracting confessions from dying monks, confiscating stones that glowed faintly when struck by sunlight. Some returned empty-handed. Others returned broken, shaken by what they had seen. A few did not return at all. One gem cutter, renowned throughout the empire for engraving icons onto tiny gemstones, disappeared 2 days before completing a meticulous study of the sapphire fragment. His room was found immaculate, as if deliberately wiped clean. His tools remained on the table, arranged neatly beside an unfinished sketch of the stone's inscription. The emperor's agents found no sign of struggle, no tracks, no witnesses, only a faint, lingering smell of heated metal. The closer the cryptoscribes came to understanding the stone, the more dangerous their work became. Some believed the church was watching. Others suspected foreign spies. A few whispered that the stone itself did not wish to be decoded, that it possessed its own kind of will, a silent resistance against human hands. Yet Theophilos pressed on. He sensed that the codex carried teachings capable of shaping the empire's future. Teachings that could transform faith into something luminous and unbound. And perhaps teachings that could unseat emperors. The cryptoscribes realized they were racing against forces they could not name. Every clue raised new questions. Every translation deepened the mystery. And beneath the palace, in those torchlit chambers, they came to understand a truth as chilling as it was awe-inspiring. The sapphire fragment was only the beginning. Somewhere within the empire, hidden behind walls of secrecy, betrayal, and fear, the remaining pages of the codex waited. And the emperor, flawed, brilliant, desperate, was determined to find them before anyone else dared to try. Emperor Theophilos stood on the balcony of the Bucolian palace, the winter wind pulling at his crimson cloak as he gazed over the city that had worshipped him, feared him, and judged him in equal measure. The morning light washed across Constantinople like a river of gold, but Theophilos's eyes were fixed not on the gleaming domes of Hagia Sophia or the vibrant bustle of the harbor. His thoughts were buried far below, in the secret chambers where knowledge was hoarded like treasure and guarded like a curse. He was a man of contradictions, a paradox made flesh. The last great iconoclast emperor, known for shattering holy images yet privately obsessed with the mysterious and the divine. His court remembered him as a fierce military ruler, but behind closed doors he was a lover of poetry, science, and forbidden texts. He feared superstition but craved revelation. He denied the sanctity of icons but spent nights studying ancient manuscripts by lamplight, hunting truths he could never publicly acknowledge. In this fragile balance of faith and power, Theophilos cultivated something the empire had never seen before. A clandestine intellectual order known only to a select few. They were called the cryptoscribes, scholars chosen not for their loyalty to doctrine, but for their ability to keep secrets that could reshape heaven and earth. They worked in silence. They wrote in code. Their existence appeared nowhere in imperial records. And yet, their influence seeped through the cracks of history like smoke. Most served voluntarily, drawn to the emperor's urgent vision. Others were compelled into service, scholars whose brilliance bordered on heresy, men and women who had delved too deeply into mystical theology or ancient sciences. Under any other reign, they might have been imprisoned or exiled. Under Theophilos, they were given a single chance at redemption. Use their knowledge to serve a purpose they would never be permitted to understand fully. Each was sworn to secrecy under penalty of death, and more chillingly under penalty of erasure. In Byzantium, to be erased from records was to die a second, more permanent death. The cryptoscribes met in hidden rooms beneath the Magnora Palace, where torchlight flickered against marble walls and the air smelled of parchment, ink, and fear. Their tasks varied, translating obscure Syriac gospels, copying fragments of ancient Greek cosmology, analyzing strange symbols brought from distant monasteries. But there was one project whispered among them that none dared discuss openly. A project so sacred, so dangerous, that even speaking its rumored name felt like handling live flame. It began with a single fragment of stone brought to the emperor by a trembling monk who had traveled for days without rest. The monk claimed it came from a monastery in Bithynia, a place where the walls whispered at night and where the brothers refused to sleep alone. He carried the fragment wrapped in wool, terrified it might glow or speak or burn through the cloth. Theophilos did not laugh. He did not dismiss the monk as delusional. He studied the fragment for hours in silence. Carved into its sapphire surface were 4 Greek letters, so delicate, so impossibly perfect, that no ordinary tool could have made them. Under lamplight, they shimmered with a faint internal radiance. When Theophilos touched it, the stone pulsed with warmth. From that moment, the emperor changed. He summoned the brightest scholars of his court. He summoned gem-cutters capable of feats whispered about in guild legends. He summoned mystics who walked the thin line between revelation and insanity. And he commanded them to investigate the fragment, to trace its origin, to understand its purpose. Weeks turned to months. The cryptoscribes worked tirelessly, comparing the stone's script to every known gospel and apocryphal text. None matched perfectly, yet all seemed faintly echoed in its message. It was as if the stone sought to rewrite familiar truths into something older, purer, more luminous. One evening, after days of sleepless study, a scholar approached the emperor with fear in his eyes. "This is no fragment of ornament or reliquary," he whispered. "It is a leaf, a page." Theophilos asked the only question that mattered. "From what?" The scholar bowed his head and replied, "A codex, a gospel in stone." The emperor's breath stopped. He understood the implications instantly. Such a work, if real, would bypass scripture controlled by the church, challenge the authority of patriarchs, and threaten the fragile balance between imperial power and spiritual doctrine. A gospel carved into sapphire would survive fire, flood, rebellion, censorship. It would survive time itself. It would be unalterable, indestructible, eternal. Rumors say that Theophilos ordered the cryptoscribes to search for the remaining pages, even if it meant trespassing into forbidden monasteries, bribing hermits, or raiding ancient tombs. They traveled through the empire in secret, carrying wax-sealed messages, extracting confessions from dying monks, confiscating stones that glowed faintly when struck by sunlight. Some returned empty-handed. Others returned broken, shaken by what they had seen. A few did not return at all. One gem-cutter, renowned throughout the empire for engraving icons onto tiny gemstones, disappeared 2 days before completing a meticulous study of the sapphire fragment. His room was found immaculate, as if deliberately wiped clean. His tools remained on the table, arranged neatly beside an unfinished sketch of the stone's inscription. The emperor's agents found no sign of struggle, no tracks, no witnesses, only a faint, lingering smell of heated metal. The closer the cryptoscribes came to understanding the stone, the more dangerous their work became. Some believed the church was watching. Others suspected foreign spies. A few whispered that the stone itself did not wish to be decoded, that it possessed its own kind of will, a silent resistance against human hands. Yet Theophilos pressed on. He sensed that the Codex carried teachings capable of shaping the empire's future. Teachings that could transform faith into something luminous and unbound. and perhaps teachings that could unseat emperors. The cryptoscribes realized they were racing against forces they could not name. Every clue raised new questions. Every translation deepened the mystery. And beneath the palace, in those torchlit chambers, they came to understand a truth as chilling as it was awe-inspiring. The sapphire fragment was only the beginning. Somewhere within the empire, hidden behind walls of secrecy, betrayal, and fear, the remaining pages of the codex waited. And the emperor, flawed, brilliant, desperate, was determined to find them before anyone else dared to try. Hadrian's genius was not limited to the marble halls, fountains, and gardens of his villa. It extended into the very blueprints of his creation. Architectural plans, sketches, and fragments of designs that survive suggest a mind consumed not only with beauty, but with precision, foresight, and, perhaps most intriguingly, secrecy. These plans were no ordinary maps of space. They were a language, a system of symbols and alignments that hinted at intentions far beyond mere construction. For Hadrian, every corridor, every staircase, every archway carried meaning. The villa itself became a canvas for intellectual exploration, a place where geometry, philosophy, and human perception intertwined. And woven within these patterns, scholars believe, are clues pointing to the hidden chamber, a room whose existence is suggested not by legend alone, but by the very logic of the villa's design. The emperor's architectural language was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. Certain symbols recur across floor mosaics, staircases, and decorative motifs. Small, deliberate anomalies that appear insignificant until viewed as part of a larger pattern. Some mosaics depict constellations in unusual alignment, as if the villa itself were oriented to celestial bodies, while others contain geometric sequences that suggest codes or messages intended for those who could decipher them. To Hadrian, the villa was not merely a home. It was a multi-layered puzzle, a three-dimensional manuscript whose pages were stone and water, and whose narrative was written in light and shadow. Each element had a purpose, each space could conceal meaning, and every hidden detail was part of a larger design meant to challenge, to protect, and perhaps to inspire awe. Among the most intriguing elements are the alignments between corridors and chambers. Careful measurement reveals that certain doorways, when approached from specific angles, frame views of sculptures or water features in ways that seem intentional, almost theatrical. These perspectives are not random. They suggest that Hadrian understood the psychology of perception, that he anticipated how observers would move through his villa and what they would notice or fail to notice. Some historians argue that this meticulous orchestration was a form of early visual encryption, a way to hide information in plain sight. A statue might point subtly toward a wall that hides a passage. A pool might reflect a ceiling in such a way as to reveal a pattern otherwise invisible. To navigate the villa successfully, one needed more than sight. One needed intuition, patience, and a mind willing to see the invisible. The surviving fragments of Hadrian's plans also hint at mechanisms. Doors that could slide, panels that could shift, hidden stairways embedded within walls. These mechanical devices, crafted with the precision of both art and engineering, suggest that Hadrian anticipated attempts to discover his secrets. Nothing in the villa's design was haphazard. Every feature could serve a dual purpose, functioning as both ornament and guardian of information. Even today, archaeologists debate the intended function of these mechanisms, because some seem to lead nowhere, while others open into spaces that remain largely unexplored. This duality, function, and obfuscation, is central to understanding the emperor's intentions. Hadrian's use of symbols extends beyond geometry and mechanics. Certain motifs recur across his villa and in other constructions he commissioned across the empire. Patterns resembling keys, labyrinthine spirals, and stylized figures holding objects that have yet to be clearly identified. Scholars speculate that these symbols represent instructions, or perhaps warnings, meant to guide only those deemed worthy or trusted. The repetition of these motifs across vast spaces suggests a deliberate, calculated effort to encode messages into the very fabric of the villa. It is as if Hadrian sought to ensure that only a mind attuned to his thinking could perceive the hidden chamber's presence and purpose. Some clues are almost playful in their subtlety. A doorway might be slightly misaligned, noticeable only at a particular time of day when sunlight strikes the marble at an exact angle. A reflection in water might reveal a line or a break in the mosaic pattern, suggesting an entrance where none appears to exist. To the untrained eye, these details seem random, inconsequential. To someone attuned to Hadrian's methods, however, they become guideposts, breadcrumbs leading toward a deeper truth. The villa's design, in this sense, is both invitation and test, challenging observers to prove their patience, attention, and insight. The plans themselves, preserved in fragments and descriptions by later historians, reveal Hadrian's fascination with complexity. He was not content with a single secret chamber. Evidence suggests multiple hidden spaces, interconnected in ways that scholars are only beginning to imagine. Some passages may have served as decoys, designed to mislead intruders, while others could have offered access to the inner sanctum where the most sensitive items were kept. Hadrian's intent appears to have been dual, to protect and to provoke curiosity. He created a labyrinth not only of stone but of thought, a place where physical exploration mirrors intellectual challenge. Yet even with these clues, the villa remains maddeningly elusive. The plans are incomplete, many symbols remain undeciphered, and the precise location of the chamber has yet to be confirmed. It is this ambiguity that sustains the villa's power over the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts alike. Each generation returns with new tools, new theories, and new hope of unraveling the emperor's mystery. Yet each leaves with questions as pressing as those they arrived with. The villa's architectural language, in its elegance and complexity, resists final interpretation. It is a conversation across time, a silent dialogue between Hadrian and anyone bold enough to seek him out. It is also worth noting that Hadrian's architectural genius was intimately connected with his personal obsessions. He sought harmony between art, philosophy, and human experience, yet he also feared exposure, betrayal, and the loss of control. The hidden chamber, encoded within the villa's intricate plans, may represent a confluence of these desires. A place of beauty and knowledge, yet fortified against intrusion. The very act of hiding something within such a grand space underscores the emperor's awareness of human ambition and the fragility of trust. Every step, every turn, every reflection may have been calculated to test loyalty, discretion, and insight. Ultimately, Hadrian's plans remind us that architecture can be more than functional. It can be a vessel for intellect, emotion, and secrecy. His villa was a living manuscript, a work of art that encoded the values, fears, and ambitions of a man who sought to outlast time itself. Within this complex web of design, patterns, and symbols, the hidden chamber exists not merely as a physical space but as an idea, a testament to a mind that understood the power of concealment and the enduring allure of the unknown. For anyone who ventures into Hadrian's villa, the plans are a silent companion, whispering that discovery requires both intellect and intuition, patience and perception, and above all, a willingness to see what others cannot. Hadrian was not a man satisfied with the mundane assurances of power. He sought guidance in realms both earthly and divine. His fascination with prophecy, philosophy, and the occult was well known among his court and confidants. Throughout his travels, he is said to have consulted seers, oracles, and philosophers alike, probing for insights that went beyond the ordinary. In Egypt, he is rumored to have visited the temples of Thebes and Memphis, observing rituals and questioning priests about hidden truths. In Greece, he walked the halls of Delphi, listening to cryptic warnings and considering the delicate interplay between fate and free will. These encounters shaped not only his worldview but also the design of his villa. Every corridor, every hidden passage, and, perhaps most importantly, the secret chamber itself may have been influenced by the arcane knowledge he accumulated on his journeys. The emperor's obsession with prophecy was not mere superstition. It was a calculated engagement with uncertainty. Ancient accounts suggest that he believed knowledge of the future, or even glimpses of it, could guide him in decisions both political and personal. Some historians argue that this preoccupation with foresight explains his extensive collection of philosophical texts, his fascination with astrology, and his meticulous attention to architectural alignment. Hadrian's villa, with its intricate layout and hidden spaces, can be read as a reflection of this obsession. A place where reality and premonition intersect, where the physical world is designed to mirror the mind's labyrinthine explorations of fate and destiny. The involvement of oracles in Hadrian's life introduces a tantalizing possibility that the secret chamber itself may have been designed to protect knowledge gleaned from prophetic insight. Ancient sources hint that Hadrian was warned of dangers not only to his reign but to his legacy, warnings that may have inspired the creation of a hidden space where critical objects or records could be kept safe. Some texts refer vaguely to knowledge too potent for the uninitiated, or words that could shift the course of empires. Though these accounts are fragmentary and often contradictory, they suggest that the chamber was not merely a hiding place for luxury or art, but for something more profound, something that Hadrian considered essential for the preservation of his vision, or perhaps even the survival of Rome itself. The emperor's fascination with prophecy intersected with his architectural genius in subtle ways. Alignments of rooms and corridors, previously thought to be purely aesthetic, may have been influenced by celestial events and astrological timing. Pools and fountains could reflect the stars, casting patterned shadows that marked significant moments or hinted at hidden passages. Certain mosaics, when viewed at specific times of the day, reveal sequences that appear almost predictive, as if guiding observers to understand not only the villa but the universe itself. Scholars today debate whether these alignments were symbolic, spiritual, or practical, but few doubt that Hadrian intended them to carry meaning for those with the insight or curiosity to perceive it. Yet prophecy was not Hadrian's only guide. He was equally devoted to the wisdom of philosophers, often inviting them to debate ethics, history, and governance. Letters and records speak of late-night discussions where he questioned even the most established truths, challenging conventional interpretations and weighing their relevance to the empire's stability. This philosophical inquiry may have directly influenced the conception of the secret chamber. If the room contained objects, texts, or instruments intended to safeguard knowledge or challenge assumptions, it would reflect a uniquely Hadrianic approach, merging intellect, foresight, and secrecy into a single, carefully orchestrated design. There are hints that Hadrian's chamber may also have been a repository for knowledge too dangerous to be openly displayed. Scholars have speculated that scrolls detailing forbidden rites, political schemes, or even revolutionary technologies could have been stored there. These are conjectures, yet they resonate with Hadrian's known preoccupations with control, legacy, and the unknown. In this light, the chamber becomes more than a room. It becomes a safeguard against ignorance, betrayal, and the misuse of knowledge. Hadrian's engagement with oracles and seers may have been less about superstition and more about ensuring that what he considered vital would survive, protected within layers of secrecy he alone understood. The interplay between prophecy and architecture suggests a deliberate strategy. Hadrian may have designed the villa, and especially the chamber, to act as a physical manifestation of foresight itself. Just as a prophet interprets signs and patterns, the chamber interprets the layout, symbols, and mechanics of the villa, preserving a message for those who can read it. If this is true, the chamber is not only a space for storage or reflection but also a carefully encoded dialogue across time, a way for Hadrian to communicate his understanding of fate, power, and human ambition to future generations. Hadrian's reliance on oracles also underscores his acute awareness of mortality. Even as emperor, he knew that life was fleeting and power impermanent. The creation of a hidden chamber may have been as much about preserving knowledge beyond his lifetime as it was about controlling it in the present. By embedding foresight into architecture, and by potentially safeguarding prophecies, the emperor ensured that a fragment of his consciousness, his philosophy, his fears, and his ambitions, could survive long after his death, shielded from those who might misinterpret or misuse it. And yet, the nature of the chamber remains tantalizingly elusive. We cannot know whether it truly housed prophetic texts, philosophical treatises, or objects of personal significance, but its very conception speaks volumes. It was born of a mind attuned to both intellect and instinct, to reason and intuition, to the visible and the hidden. The deeper the artisans carved and the more the scholars translated, the more a troubling realization took shape. What lay inscribed on the sapphire slabs did not simply reinterpret scripture. It diverged from it in ways that made even seasoned theologians tremble. The text was familiar enough to feel sacred, yet strange enough to feel dangerous, like a melody whose final note had been shifted just slightly off-key, awakening an entirely different emotion in the listener. The first passages hinted at a vision of creation unlike anything in the canonical Gospels. Instead of beginning with the spoken word, the sapphire inscriptions described creation as a burst of living radiance, a divine pulse that filled the universe before any form or law or soul existed. This radiance was called Sophia Fotini, the light of wisdom, not personified, not gendered, but a universal awareness that permeated all things. The scholars who read this line exchanged uneasy glances. The concept was familiar enough to evoke whispers of early Christian mysticism, but bold enough to undermine the rigid theological structures built over centuries. In this gospel, divine wisdom was not restricted to prophets, priests, or emperors. It was not mediated through icons or relics or rituals. It flowed everywhere, like light filtering through a stained glass window, different in color to each observer, but unchanged in essence. That idea alone would have unsettled the empire. But the rest went even further. The Sapphire text described a teacher, unnamed, undefined, who spoke in parables unfamiliar to any known scripture. This teacher, described not as a figure of flesh but as a voice clothed in blue fire, revealed that every human soul was a shard of that first radiance, a spark of the original divine light. Salvation, the text implied, was not granted through obedience to earthly authorities, but awakened through recognition of one's inner illumination. To the scholars, this was heresy wrapped in poetry. If divinity dwelled in every person equally, what purpose did emperors serve? What role remained for patriarchs, councils, or clergy? What use were the countless rituals, laws, and hierarchies that upheld the empire's spiritual order? The passages seemed written with a kind of serene defiance, as if the authors understood they would be condemned and carved their insights into sapphire precisely because they believed them worth preserving beyond fear. Some lines glowed brighter than others, their meaning clear even to those unfamiliar with theology. The kingdom is not above nor below, but within the chamber of the heart. No altar is needed when the soul itself is a temple. Seek not the throne of heaven. Seek the light that already dwells in the marrow of your being. These phrases struck at the heart of Byzantine power. They denied the emperor's divine right. They dismissed the patriarch's necessity as mediator. They made every believer a vessel of revelation, which meant no institution could claim ownership of truth. And then came the passage that chilled the scholars most deeply. Beware those who trade in fear, for they seek to hide the light. They will declare the truth forbidden. They will call the radiant path a lie. Yet the stone remembers. The last line repeated across several pages, carved with microscopic precision, each repetition smaller than the last, as if spiraling inward toward some hidden meaning. The stone remembers. The phrase haunted the cryptoscribes. Some believed it was metaphorical, others insisted it implied the codex held additional layers, possibly encoded in the sapphire's crystalline structure. One scholar proposed, dangerously, that the gospel was reactive, that light or heat might reveal secondary inscriptions invisible to the naked eye. But it was the theological implications that terrified the emperor most. If the Sapphire Codex spread, even as rumor, it could spark a movement the empire could not control. Theophilos's iconoclastic policies, already controversial, would look insignificant compared to this text's radical ideas. Both icon worshippers and iconoclasts would see him as a threat. Rival factions could use the gospel to justify rebellion. One scholar warned the emperor that the text could create a third path, a spiritual doctrine outside imperial or ecclesiastical authority, a path where power held no divine sanction unless it aligned with inner illumination. Theophilos dismissed him publicly but summoned him privately that night. What would become of an empire if such teachings spread? The emperor asked. The scholar hesitated, then answered honestly, it would not survive. After that, the emperor's demeanor shifted. His curiosity did not wane, but it twisted into something darker, an obsession mingled with dread. He demanded translations of every line, cross-examined scholars through sleepless nights, and kept the unfinished pages hidden under his personal guard. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. One fragment described a future where the empire of gold collapses under its own shadow, replaced not by another empire but by a dawn of wandering sparks. A poetic image that could be interpreted as a prophecy of fragmentation, of a world in which no central authority reigned. Another stated, "When kings claim the mantle of heaven, the light withdraws." To an emperor who styled himself God's chosen sovereign, this line landed like an arrow. But there was one teaching, carved near the very center of the Codex, that terrified everyone who read it. It claimed that divine revelation belonged not to councils or books or rulers, but to the individual. It said every soul contained a unique pattern of light, a pathway only that person could walk. Salvation was not collective, it was intimate, inward, unavoidable. This teaching was revolutionary, dangerous, and entirely incompatible with the empire's need for obedience. The bishop overseeing the translations begged Theophilos to destroy the Codex, warning that even possessing it constituted spiritual treason. But the emperor refused. Something about the sapphire pages held him captive. Some mixture of fear, fascination, and faint hope. Perhaps he sensed that beneath its threat to his authority lay a truth he desperately wanted to understand. Perhaps he feared that destroying the Codex would provoke divine wrath. Or perhaps he simply knew this. Once a truth is carved into sapphire, it becomes almost impossible to bury. The forbidden theology within the sapphire slabs continued to unravel, page by page, illuminating and unsettling in equal measure. And while the emperor struggled to decide the Codex's fate, the scholars who worked in the shadows began to notice something ominous. Something that suggested the gospel itself was incomplete. There were references to a final chapter. A chapter no one had yet found. A chapter that, according to the inscriptions, revealed the origin of the light. The missing chapter became the most terrifying mystery of all. The summer of 860 arrived with a sky the color of tarnished copper, thick with heat and omens. Constantinople, usually so confident behind its towering Theodosian walls, began to tremble beneath the weight of rumors. From the docks of the Golden Horn to the quiet courtyards of monasteries, whispers spread like wildfire. An enemy fleet had been sighted on the horizon, vast, swift, relentless. By the time scouts returned breathless to the palace gates, the truth could no longer be denied. The Rus, fierce raiders from the north, had descended upon the Bosphorus like a storm of iron. Their longships pierced the waters in tight formation, moving with an unnerving silence, as though guided by a single breath. Inside the city, panic churned beneath the surface. The market stayed open by daylight, but merchants packed their stalls secretly at night. Priests began conducting additional prayer services. Mothers clutched their children a little tighter. And in the shadowed corridors of the Magnora Palace, Emperor Michael III ordered the cryptoscribes and their sapphire gospel to be protected at all costs. The workshop beneath the palace was sealed. Documents, tools, and unfinished slabs were hidden behind stone panels that only a few knew existed. A dozen guards were stationed outside, sworn to fight to the death. But protecting the Codex required more than guards. It required concealment, layers of secrecy woven like a net. The emperor summoned the scholars, their faces pale in the flickering lamplight. "If the city falls," he said, "I will not have this gospel, whatever its truth, twisted or stolen by foreign hands." He gave a simple command: hide it. Hide it so deeply that even future emperors would doubt its existence. Theophanes, the elder scribe whose hands still shook from translating passages that questioned the very nature of divine authority, stepped forward. "There is a vault beneath Hagia Sophia," he said quietly, "older than the city, older perhaps than the first church built upon that ground." Every scholar in the room had heard legends of it. An ancient crypt, buried so far beneath the earth that even earthquakes could not reach it. A place forgotten by time, sealed by stone so thick the empire had deemed it unnecessary to map. That night, under the cover of darkness and the rising tension in the streets, the cryptoscribes moved the Sapphire Codex from the palace. The slabs were wrapped in wool and shrouded in heavy cloth, carried by 6 men who struggled beneath their weight. They traveled through side corridors and service tunnels, paths known only to palace servants and imperial spies. Above them, the city roared with fear as church bells rang warnings. By the time they reached Hagia Sophia, the chants of soldiers on the walls echoed like thunder. The Rus fleet had drawn closer, their fires visible across the water. The great church trembled with the footsteps of clergy preparing relics for protection. Yet amidst the chaos, the scribes slipped inside unnoticed. Hagia Sophia loomed like a mountain of shadow and stone. Candles flickered along its aisles, lighting the way to the ancient trapdoor hidden behind a column. It took 3 men to lift it. Dust spiraled upward as they revealed a staircase descending into darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow the lamplight. Down they went step by step. The air grew colder, heavier. The walls closed in, carved with symbols too worn to decipher. At the bottom lay a chamber shaped like a hollowed-out sphere. The walls were smooth stone, damp with age. This was the vault. They set the codex in the center, an unlit heart in the middle of an ancient womb. The slabs made a sound when placed on the floor, a soft, resonant hum like a distant bell. The men froze. No one spoke. They completed their task in silence. But as they prepared to leave, a low rumble shook the chamber, dust falling from above. The ground trembled. The scribes exchanged alarmed glances. The siege had begun. Moments later, the first wave of Rus warriors crashed against the city walls. Constantinople shuddered under the impact of their assault. Horns blared. Shouts echoed. Fires broke out near the harbors as flaming arrows streaked across the sky like red comets. Inside the vault, the scribes rushed up the stairs, sealing the trapdoor behind them. They knew the codex was safe, buried under layers of stone no raider could possibly reach. Still, fear gnawed at them. If the city were to fall, would anyone live to remember what they had hidden? Outside, chaos erupted. Torches illuminated the streets as panicked citizens fled toward the inner districts. Soldiers sprinted to reinforce the sea walls. The distant sound of armored feet pounding against stone sent tremors through the ground. In the midst of this turmoil, a single sapphire slab did not remain in the vault. One had been removed earlier in secret, by a monk whose conscience had outweighed his fear of imperial wrath. A monk who believed the gospel's message too vital to be locked away forever. He had hidden the slab beneath his robe and vanished hours before the codex was sealed. No one noticed until it was too late. While Constantinople defended itself with fire and prayer, that monk fled across the Bosphorus under moonlight, rowing a small boat through a fog-draped channel. The stolen slab lay wrapped in linen beside him, its faint blue glow reflecting on the water. Behind him, the city burned. Ahead of him, darkness stretched like an open path. The siege that buried the Sapphire Codex also scattered its secrets, and ensured that one page would carry its forbidden truth far beyond the empire's reach. The monastery at the edge of Bithynia clung to the mountainside like a stubborn survivor, its stone walls streaked with moss, its roofs battered by decades of wind and rain. It was a lonely place, too remote for pilgrims, too humble for nobles, too forgotten for war to reach. And yet within its dim corridors lived a fear so palpable that even the birds refused to roost near its windows. The monks who dwelled there were worn, quiet men. They prayed not with passion but with resignation, as though begging God for the courage to endure another day. Whispers drifted through their cloisters at night, whispers of visions, of strange lights, of voices that murmured from empty hallways. But the most frightening of all these whispers concerned the sapphire slab that had arrived under cloak of darkness. The monks never placed it on an altar. They did not dare keep it in the church. Instead, they locked it in a narrow chamber carved from living rock, a place usually reserved for penitents and dying brothers. Even there, they feared its presence. For in the dead of night, when the monastery fell silent and only the wind sighed through the rafters, the slab seemed to exhale faint pulses of blue light, soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Some monks refused to pass near the door after sunset. Others claimed they heard voices when they leaned too close, whispers that seemed to come from deep beneath the stone, as though the codex carried memories of its own creation. But for one monk, the sapphire slab's arrival felt less like a curse and more like a calling. His name was Brother Isidoros, the youngest among them, a man barely in his 20s with eyes too sharp and curious for a cloistered life. While the others averted their gaze, Isidoros could not resist the mystery. He asked questions, too many questions. Where had the stone come from? What did it contain? Why did the elders tremble whenever they spoke of it? And why, when he drew near, did he feel a warmth in his chest, as if something inside him answered the stone? The elder monks warned him sternly, "Do not open the chamber alone. Do not study the inscriptions. God hides some truths for a reason." But Isidoros had never been good at obeying vague warnings. One winter evening, when a storm ripped across the mountains and thunder shook the wooden beams, Isidoros slipped away from evening prayers and descended into the lower passages of the monastery. His lantern flickered weakly, its flame bending under the draft of cold air spiraling up from the earth. As he approached the stone chamber, the air grew heavier, charged with an almost electrical tension. He hesitated before the door, his breath visible in the frigid air. For a moment he considered turning back, but something, curiosity, fate, temptation, pushed him forward. He lifted the iron latch. The chamber was pitch black except for a faint blue glow leaking from beneath the linen cloth draped over the slab. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The storm howled outside, but down here only the sound of his heartbeat filled the silence. Hands trembling, he pulled away the cloth. The sapphire slab lit the room with a soft, unearthly radiance. Its inscriptions shimmered like constellations frozen beneath glass. Isidoros leaned closer, tracing the lines with trembling fingers. The Greek was archaic but readable, its meaning both familiar and unsettling. He read aloud, barely more than a whisper. "The light is not given, it awakens." A shiver ran down his spine. Another line, "Where fear builds walls, wisdom carves a door." He read on, faster now, compelled by something he did not understand. The teachings were unlike anything he had encountered, gentle yet radical, challenging yet comforting. The gospel felt alive, as if it responded to his thoughts. And then he reached a passage that froze him. "Write this upon the breath of your days, and let no fear bind the truth within you." He swallowed hard. The words seemed directed at him alone. Without knowing why, he tore a sheet of parchment from the hymnal tucked into his robe. He dipped his quill into ink, and by lantern light, he began to copy the inscriptions. Every curve, every glimmer, every shimmering line. His hand moved with a strange ease, as though the words flowed not from the stone but from within him. Hours passed unnoticed. The storm finally began to fade. When he finished copying the final line on the visible surface, Isidoros realized something astonishing. The stone felt warm beneath his hands, almost alive. He lifted his lantern higher, examining the slab from different angles. Then he saw it. Along the edges of the stone, so faint they could be missed entirely, were more inscriptions. Smaller, hidden beneath the primary text. Words carved so delicately they were visible only when light hit the sapphire at a precise angle. He angled the lantern slowly. The letters appeared like dawn breaking across a dark horizon. Isidoros's breath caught. This was no ordinary gospel. This was a layered message, a codex within a codex, designed for those brave or foolish enough to look deeper. Words that glowed only when the bearer approached them with intention. He copied those too, though his hands shook now, and sweat dripped down his brow. When at last he emerged from the chamber, the sky was paling with the first touch of dawn. Snow had settled across the courtyard. The bells for morning prayer had not yet rung. He clutched the parchment to his chest, its ink still wet, his heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. He knew what he had done could be considered treason, against the emperor, the church, perhaps even God. He knew the slab was meant to be hidden, forgotten, entombed. But he also knew the truth now, a truth that refused to leave his mind. The Sapphire Codex did not want to be buried. It wanted to be read. Over the next weeks, Isidoros visited the chamber again and again, copying more lines in secret, filling pages with forbidden teachings. The other monks sensed something changing in him. He walked lighter, as if guided by a strange new clarity. He prayed differently, more quietly, more intensely, as if listening for a voice no one else could hear. But secrets never rest long in a monastery where silence sharpens suspicion. It was only a matter of time before someone discovered the parchment hidden beneath his mat. And when they did, the quiet monastery of Bithynia would cease to be a refuge. It would become a battleground for the truth written in blue stone. The hidden passageways of Hadrian's villa are as enigmatic as the emperor himself. Long corridors twist unpredictably, staircases climb and descend in disorienting patterns, and doors appear to vanish depending on the angle of approach. For those who wander the villa without guidance, the experience is both mesmerizing and unnerving, as if the architecture itself is alive, responding to the observer's curiosity or hesitation. Scholars have long debated whether these passageways were designed primarily for practical purposes, such as servant movement and private access, or whether they were deliberate instruments of concealment, meant to mislead, test, or protect. Evidence strongly suggests the latter, and it is here, within these labyrinthine arteries, that the first tangible hints of the secret chamber emerge. Some corridors, once thought to be ordinary service routes, reveal subtler complexities upon close inspection. Slight depressions in the floor, irregularities in the masonry, or unexpected echoes in the walls suggest intentional anomalies. A seemingly ordinary door may conceal a sliding panel, leading to a staircase embedded within the wall, accessible only to those who know its mechanism. Pools and fountains placed nearby create reflections that can either reveal or obscure entrances, depending on the observer's perspective. It is an architecture designed to manipulate perception, creating uncertainty and awe in equal measure. Every step in these passageways feels calculated, as if Hadrian anticipated not only movement but thought, testing whether visitors would notice anomalies or dismiss them as inconsequential. The villa's subterranean network is particularly intriguing. Beneath the visible layers of halls and gardens lies a hidden skeleton of tunnels and chambers, some of which remain unexplored to this day. Archaeological surveys have detected cavities beneath the villa's foundations, irregular spaces that resist easy explanation. These hidden areas were likely constructed for a dual purpose: secrecy and protection. Some scholars suggest that the emperor may have stored sensitive documents, personal relics, or even experimental artifacts within these hidden depths, safeguarding them from both political rivals and casual discovery. Others propose a more esoteric function, speculating that the tunnels were designed to guide ritualistic or symbolic journeys, echoing Hadrian's fascination with prophecy, philosophy, and spiritual symbolism. The interplay between architecture and psychology is particularly evident in the villa's hidden corridors. Certain passageways create optical illusions, bending light and perspective to make spaces appear larger, smaller, or differently oriented than they are. Mosaics and frescoes along the walls often contain irregularities that only make sense when viewed from specific vantage points, guiding the observer's attention or hiding subtle cues. A small carving, a shifted tile, or the angle of a column could indicate a hidden entrance, but only to those who understand the emperor's language of design. In this way, the villa becomes more than a physical structure. It becomes a test of perception, intellect, and intuition, a puzzle layered upon a puzzle, with the secret chamber as the ultimate reward. Some of the most tantalizing clues about the chamber's location are found near the villa's water features. Fountains, pools, and artificial lakes were not merely decorative. They were instruments of concealment and misdirection. Reflections could obscure entrances or hint at hidden alignments, while the sound of flowing water could mask footsteps or whispers. Certain pools, when approached at specific times of day, align with mosaics or statues in ways that suggest a pathway or mechanism. Modern studies of the villa's hydraulics reveal an extraordinary level of engineering, one that allows water to flow in precise patterns, creating both beauty and secrecy simultaneously. It is possible that the hidden chamber was intentionally placed in proximity to such features, both for protection and as a means of guiding those deemed worthy to its threshold. The psychological dimension of the villa extends even further. The year 1204 arrived like a curse. Winter still clung to the city, but the true chill came not from the wind off the Marmara Sea. It came from the sound of foreign boots marching closer to Constantinople's walls. Word had traveled for months across Europe. The Crusaders of the Fourth Crusade, diverted from their original holy mission, were advancing on the Queen of Cities with a hunger that had nothing to do with salvation. When the first Venetian ships appeared on the horizon, sleek, dark silhouettes bristling with soldiers and siege engines, an eerie stillness swept over Constantinople. It was a silence born not of prayer, but of dread. Citizens watched from rooftops. Priests wept in the doorways of their churches. Even the sea birds circled higher, as if sensing that something ancient and irreplaceable was about to shatter. The Crusaders came not as pilgrims, but as raiders, and the city that had stood as a beacon for centuries felt its walls tremble. Inside the Byzantine monastery, far from the immediate terror but not far enough to escape its echo, Brother Isidoro sensed that the world outside was collapsing. News traveled slowly, but fear traveled quickly. Messengers arrived breathless, reporting fire, chaos, and betrayal. The monks huddled in their dim hall, their prayers thin and shaking. And yet, the stone chamber holding the sapphire slab remained untouched, silent and glowing faintly in the darkness. And in that silence, a decision began to form. Within Constantinople, the Crusaders breached the walls on a day the sky burned red with sunset. They poured into the streets like a tide of steel and fury. French knights, German mercenaries, Venetian sailors. They smashed icons, stripped altars, and set fire to homes older than their own histories. Priceless libraries were thrown into the streets. Silk robes, gold reliquaries, relics of forgotten saints. All looted, traded, or burned. The city screamed. Flames danced across the palace rooftops, their light glinting off the bronze shields of the invaders. Smoke choked the horizon and blotted out the sun. The Hagia Sophia, sanctuary of the world, collapsed beneath the weight of countless soldiers storming its nave, turning its marble floors into a battlefield. Amid this pandemonium, a single French knight named Guillaume de la Roche pushed through the smoke-filled aisles of a plundered chapel near the sea gate. Guillaume was not a pious man, nor a cruel one, merely a restless soul seeking fortune that had always eluded him. He had joined the crusade to escape debt and obscurity. He expected gold or relics, not revelations. But as he waded through the wreckage, splintered benches, torn vestments, a shattered icon of the archangel, something caught his eye. A cloth-wrapped object half-buried beneath collapsed beams. It glowed, not brightly, not unnaturally, but enough to draw him forward like a whisper in the dark. Guillaume knelt, hands trembling slightly as he brushed aside debris. The object was shockingly heavy. When he pulled back the cloth, he froze. A slab of deep blue stone, polished to a mirror sheen, radiated a faint, eerie glow from the inscriptions carved into its surface. Greek letters shimmered like frozen fire. Guillaume had never seen anything like it. He thought at first it was some kind of altar fragment or an icon removed from its setting. He whispered, "What are you?" The slab gave no answer, but something in its silence unnerved him. It felt sacred, but wrongfully so, as if it had never meant to be touched by raiders. Guillaume quickly wrapped it again, glancing nervously around the ruined chapel. Looters shouted outside. Swords clashed. Flames crackled. In this chaos, no one noticed the French knight dragging his mysterious treasure toward the exit. He reached the shoreline at dusk, loading the slab into the hold of a Venetian transport ship. A merchant, thin, sharp-eyed, watched him. "What have you found, chevalier?" the Venetian asked in a tone too casual to be innocent. "A stone from an altar," Guillaume lied. The merchant did not challenge him. He merely smiled, calculating. "We can speak of its price once we reach calm waters." Guillaume nodded, though unease prickled his spine. He didn't trust the man's smile, but he trusted the slab even less. As the ships retreated from the burning city, Guillaume stood on the deck, staring back at the glowing skyline of Constantinople. The sapphire slab sat hidden below, wrapped in cloth, silent as a held breath. The Crusaders had plundered gold, jewels, relics, even horses, but none of them knew that the most precious artifact taken from the city was in the hands of a man who didn't understand its significance. Days later, the Venetian merchant invited Guillaume into his cabin. "Show me the stone," he insisted. Against his instincts, Guillaume agreed. When the merchant removed the cloth and saw the sapphire surface, his eyes widened, not with greed but recognition. "This," he whispered, "this is not an altarpiece." Guillaume stiffened. "Then what is it?" The merchant swallowed hard. "A fragment of a gospel, a forbidden one." Guillaume laughed, though it sounded hollow. "Scriptures carved in stone? Impossible." The merchant leaned close, lowering his voice. "There are scholars, very few, who speak of such things. A gospel sealed in sapphire. A scripture the Byzantines hid from the world." Guillaume felt the cabin shrink around him. "You're mad." "Perhaps," the merchant whispered, "or perhaps the world is larger than you think." He offered Guillaume a pouch of silver. "Heavy, very heavy." "For the slab," he said. Guillaume hesitated only a moment before taking the silver. He felt relief wash over him. Whatever curse the object carried was no longer his to bear. He did not see the merchant's anxious glance, or the way his fingers trembled as he packed the slab into a chest reinforced with iron. That night, the merchant locked himself in his cabin with the sapphire gospel. He studied the glowing letters until his eyes burned. He wrote feverishly into his journal, and 2 days later, he was found dead, face twisted in shock, chest crushed as though by an invisible weight. His notes were missing. The chest had been rifled. The slab was gone. It had changed hands again. And somewhere across the Adriatic, a new shadowy chapter in the journey of the Sapphire Codex had begun. One that would scatter its pages across Europe and ensure that the gospel carved in blue stone would haunt history for centuries to come. The lagoon of Venice shimmered beneath a gray morning sky, its waters sluggish and heavy, as if burdened by secrets older than the city itself. Canals wound through the city like veins of quiet tension, carrying whispers from merchant to sailor, scholar to spy. And somewhere within that shifting labyrinth of water and shadow lived a man who dealt not in silk or spices, but in knowledge, dangerous, forbidden knowledge. His name was Jacopo Zanetti. Not a nobleman, not a priest, not a warrior, just a merchant with sharp eyes, an unreadable face, and a reputation for uncovering things others preferred buried. People said Jacopo could look at an object and tell its birthplace, its age, and the lies its owner whispered about it. His shop near the Rialto Bridge overflowed with curiosities. Roman rings, Eastern amulets, slivers of old manuscripts, shards of broken mosaics. Most were authentic. Some were legends sculpted into reality by his own skilled hands. But Jacopo's true passion lay not in trinkets, but in mysteries. Which is why, when a French knight named Guillaume de la Roche walked into his shop carrying a heavy iron chest, Jacopo felt a shiver run beneath his skin, like a spider sensing vibrations on its web. Guillaume's face was strained, his armor dented from the sack of Constantinople. His voice barely concealed the weight of what he had seen. Churches defiled, treasures burned, saints cast aside like broken pottery. But Jacopo understood the eyes of a man carrying something he didn't want, something he feared. He welcomed Guillaume into the back room, where dust motes floated like tiny stars in the lamplight. "Open the chest," Jacopo said softly. Guillaume hesitated. For a heartbeat, Jacopo wondered if the knight might abandon the treasure and leave. But greed, fear, or desperation won. He lifted the lid. Even wrapped in cloth, the slab emitted a faint, icy glow. Jacopo felt the air shift around it, as though the room itself inhaled. The merchant stepped closer, his fingers tingling as he brushed the edge of the cloth aside. The sapphire surface gleamed in the lamplight like a piece of the night sky, deep, fathomless, almost alive. And the inscriptions, the Greek letters shimmered faintly, as though lit from within by a secret fire. Jacopo's breath caught. He had studied hundreds of stones. None had ever glowed. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. Guillaume recounted a twisted story of chaos, fire, and accidental discovery. Jacopo listened without speaking. When the night finished, the merchant simply nodded. "It is not an altarpiece," Jacopo murmured. Guillaume stiffened. "Then what is it?" Jacopo did not answer immediately. Instead, he fetched a magnifying lens crafted from Venetian crystal. He studied the inscriptions closely. The letters were precise, elegant, too perfect for any simple artisan. He traced a groove with his fingernail. It was warm. That frightened him. At last he said, "This is scripture, but not any scripture the church would sanction." Guillaume swallowed hard. "Then I want nothing to do with it." Jacopo smiled faintly. "No, I imagine you don't." A deal was struck quickly. Silver changed hands. Guillaume fled the shop as though escaping a specter. And Jacopo, now alone with the sapphire slab, pulled the curtains shut and sealed the door. For 3 days he did not sleep. He examined the slab under candlelight, under moonlight, in near darkness. The inscriptions seemed to shift when viewed at different angles, revealing faint symbols beneath the primary text. He sketched every visible mark onto parchment, his lines shaking, his breath shallow. At one point, he touched a particular cluster of letters and felt a pulse travel up his arm. His vision blurred, and for a split second he saw something impossible. A figure of light, standing in a vast space of blue fire. He jerked his hand away, heart racing. "This is no relic," he whispered. "This is something else." Worse still, Jacopo sensed he was being watched. Footsteps paused outside his shop at odd hours. Shadows lingered longer than humanly possible. Once, returning from the market, he found the lock on his door scratched, as if someone had tried to enter but changed their mind. He began sleeping with a dagger beneath his pillow. On the 4th night, after hours bent over the slab, Jacopo leaned back and let exhaustion wash over him. He scribbled a final line into his notebook. The letters respond to heat, to breath, to touch. This is scripture etched in light. He never wrote another word. Sometime before dawn, a neighbor awoke to the sound of shattering glass. When he rushed into Jacopo's shop, he found the merchant collapsed on the floor, his face twisted in terror, his hands frozen as though reaching for something just beyond his grasp. The dagger lay untouched beside him. There were no bruises, no wounds, no signs of struggle. Only his eyes remained open, wide, glassy, filled with the reflection of something the neighbor could not see. The chest that had held the sapphire slab was empty. Jacopo's notebooks were gone, save for a single torn page lying beneath the table. It bore a hurried sketch of the slab, its letters glowing like tiny stars, and beneath it, written in a shaky hand, "It awakened." By sunrise, rumors spread through the canals like oil on water. Some said Jacopo had angered a Venetian noble. Others whispered he had dabbled in forbidden magic. A few insisted the sapphire gospel had devoured his soul. The truth vanished as quickly as the slab. Where the sapphire fragment went next, no one could say. Some believed a thief stole it in the night. Others suspected one of Jacopo's clients, a collector of heretical artifacts, claimed it before the city guards arrived. A boat departing the lagoon at dawn was seen with a heavy crate aboard, its destination unknown. All that was certain was this: the man who knew too much was gone, his notes erased, his life extinguished, and the sapphire slab, alive, glowing, restless, had slipped once again into the shadows of Europe, leaving death and silence in its wake. The modern search for Hadrian's hidden chamber is as much an expedition of intellect as it is of archaeology. Unlike the early explorers who relied on fragmented accounts and intuition, contemporary archaeologists bring an arsenal of technology to bear. Ground-penetrating radar, 3D laser scanning, digital modeling, and even geophysical surveys capable of revealing anomalies beneath centuries of stone and soil. Yet even with these advanced tools, the villa guards its secrets fiercely. The more researchers uncover, the more complex the villa appears, revealing a network of corridors, tunnels, and hidden rooms that seem to expand with every new study. Each discovery raises as many questions as it answers, leaving the chamber itself tantalizingly out of reach. One of the first modern breakthroughs came when archaeologists began systematically mapping the villa in 3 dimensions. Unlike traditional 2-dimensional plans, this approach allowed them to identify subtle irregularities in walls, floors, and ceilings, imperfections that may indicate concealed spaces or mechanisms, staircases that terminate in blank walls, corridors that shift unexpectedly, and slight depressions in mosaic patterns all suggested intentional design, anomalies too deliberate to be accidental. When combined with historical records and accounts from ancient visitors, these irregularities created a map of possibilities, a network of potential hidden zones that could contain the elusive chamber. The villa's water systems have also become a focus of investigation. Ancient engineers had constructed elaborate aqueducts, pools, and fountains with precise hydraulic calculations, some of which may have doubled as concealment devices. For instance, subterranean channels might have concealed entryways or masked the sound of movement, while reflective surfaces could reveal hidden mechanisms only under specific lighting conditions. Modern researchers have used simulations to model how light and shadow interact with these water features at different times of day and across seasons. The results are astonishing. Certain reflections align with mosaic patterns and structural anomalies, hinting at entrances that remain invisible to the casual eye. In this way, Hadrian's villa continues to challenge perception, even centuries after its construction. The artifacts recovered from the villa further complicate the mystery. Fragments of papyrus, partially legible inscriptions, and remnants of sculptural tools suggest not only construction but also usage patterns that are difficult to interpret. Some items hint at storage of philosophical or religious texts, while others imply ceremonial functions or secretive administrative activities. The problem, of course, is interpretation. It is nearly impossible to determine which fragments were related to the hidden chamber and which were incidental. Yet even these small clues hint at the breadth of Hadrian's ambition, suggesting that the chamber, if it exists, was not merely a physical hiding place, but a repository of intellect, faith, or power. A particularly compelling line of inquiry focuses on the villa's subterranean tunnels. Excavations in certain areas have revealed cavities and passageways that diverge from the main structures, sometimes abruptly ending or connecting to voids not indicated in any surviving plans. Some tunnels show signs of meticulous construction, while others appear purposefully disorienting. In some cases, doors, panels, and staircases are so cleverly integrated that their presence is detectable only through precise measurement and careful observation. These subterranean networks form a labyrinth within a labyrinth, and many scholars now believe that the hidden chamber is likely located within this complex underground system, protected by both architecture and ingenuity. Despite technological advances, the villa resists full comprehension. Each mapping project reveals unexpected anomalies, and each discovery seems to open new avenues of speculation. Researchers have proposed theories ranging from secret libraries to ceremonial sanctuaries, from treasure repositories to philosophical retreats. Some suggest that the chamber may contain documents or artifacts that, if found, could shed light on Hadrian's personal life, his philosophical pursuits, or even political strategies. Others speculate that the chamber may have been intended for more symbolic purposes, a private sanctuary reflecting Hadrian's intellectual and spiritual journey. The ambiguity itself, however, is central to the villa's enduring fascination. Historical accounts continue to provide tantalizing clues. Ancient texts occasionally hint at restricted areas within the villa or rooms beyond reach, though descriptions are always cryptic. Servants and guides recorded rumors of staircases that disappeared, doors that shifted, and walls that echoed unexpectedly. While these reports are impossible to verify completely, patterns emerge when they are compared across centuries. Many of the anomalies described by early visitors coincide with areas flagged by modern archaeologists as potential hidden spaces. Taken together, these observations suggest that the hidden chamber was not a fleeting fantasy, but a deliberate architectural and psychological design. The human element of exploration adds another layer of intrigue. Teams of archaeologists, historians, and engineers often find themselves in situations that mirror the experiences of Hadrian's builders. Frustration, exhilaration, and the thrill of uncovering subtle details that may point towards something extraordinary. When a hidden staircase is discovered behind a wall, or a mosaic aligns perfectly with an architectural anomaly, the excitement is palpable. Yet these moments are fleeting, often yielding more questions than answers. The search for the chamber is as much a test of patience and insight as it is of technical skill, a modern reflection of the challenges imposed by Hadrian centuries earlier. The villa also presents philosophical challenges. Modern researchers must consider not only what the chamber might contain, but why it was hidden in the first place. Was it a vault for knowledge and treasures, a space for private meditation, or a repository of secrets meant to survive the fall of empires? These questions are compounded by Hadrian's evident fascination with prophecy, philosophy, and human perception. The chamber may represent a confluence of all these elements, a physical embodiment of intellect, faith, and foresight. A space where the emperor's mind, concerns, and obsessions converge. And yet, for all the technology and scholarship, the villa retains its aura of mystery. Every excavation, survey, and experiment reinforces the notion that Hadrian's design is layered, complex, and deliberately confounding. Each new discovery invites reinterpretation, suggesting that the chamber is more than a single room. It is a symbol, a culmination of architectural brilliance, intellectual curiosity, and the human desire to conceal and protect. To approach it is to engage in a dialogue across centuries, to follow the traces of a mind that understood perception, secrecy, and the enduring power of the unknown. In the end, the modern search for Hadrian's hidden chamber is a testament to human curiosity, ingenuity, and the irresistible allure of mystery. Technology may reveal walls, corridors, and tunnels, but it cannot yet reveal intent, meaning, or the precise contents of the concealed room. Scholars continue to debate, explore, and speculate, but the chamber remains just beyond reach, a shadow of genius waiting to be fully comprehended. It is both a challenge and a reward, a place where the past, present, and imagination intersect, and where Hadrian's extraordinary intellect continues to speak to those willing to listen. He lay on a low divan, wrapped in thin blankets that could no longer warm him. The summer heat of 1574 pressed heavily against the walls of the Ottoman scholar's chamber, yet the old man shivered as though winter clung to his bones. His attendants whispered that his breath had grown shallow, that his eyes no longer focused on the world before him. The chief physician assured the palace that age had claimed him. But those who knew the scholar best, the ones who had seen the fear behind his quiet composure, suspected something else. He was dying of a secret. Nasiruddin el-Kayseri, known in court circles for his knowledge of ancient tongues and obscure philosophies, had lived a life measured in manuscripts and candlelight. He had spent decades translating forgotten Greek treatises, studying alchemical diagrams, debating mystics, and cataloging relics brought from every corner of the empire. Yet none of these pursuits had aged him. None had carved terror into his eyes. Only the sapphire slab had done that. For weeks before his decline, servants heard him muttering in his sleep, fragments of Greek prayers, half-formed sentences about light, voices, and the breath beneath the stone. He ate little. He slept less. He sealed his chamber door each night and forbade anyone from entering until morning. Still, the palace's shadowy corridors carried the rumors that the scholar had touched something forbidden, something that whispered in the dark. Now, as his final hours approached, he demanded the presence of a single person. His former student, a quiet young calligrapher named Yusuf. The attendants hesitated. Deathbed confessions were dangerous things, especially from a scholar who had wandered too close to forbidden knowledge. But the old man insisted. With trembling hands, he scrawled Yusuf's name onto a scrap of parchment. "Bring him," he rasped. "He must hear." When Yusuf entered the chamber, the air felt unnaturally heavy. The candles flickered despite the stillness. Nasiruddin lay propped by pillows, his face ashen, his eyes burning not with life, but with the urgency of a man racing against time. Yusuf bowed deeply. "Master, I came as you asked." "Shut the door," the old man whispered, "and bar it." The young man hesitated, then obeyed. When he returned to the bedside, Nasiruddin's hand shot out, grasping his wrist with surprising strength. "Listen carefully," the dying scholar said. "What I tell you must never be spoken beyond these walls." Yusuf nodded. Nasiruddin exhaled shakily. "You have heard the whispers of the blue stone, yes?" Yusuf hesitated, then replied, "Only rumors, master, that the palace once held a strange artifact from the time of the Greeks, that it vanished long ago." The old man laughed weakly. "Vanished? No, things like that do not vanish. They move." He closed his eyes as though gathering strength from some unseen reservoir. "I saw it, Yusuf, years ago, before anyone warned me away." The young calligrapher felt his pulse quicken. He had never seen his mentor speak with such naked fear. "I was shown the sapphire stone in secret," Nasiruddin continued. "Deep in a vault beneath Topkapi, a small chamber, forgotten by most, remembered only by those who fear knowledge rather than seek it." He swallowed painfully, then whispered, "It glowed when I approached." A shiver ran down Yusuf's spine. "I thought it a trick of the torchlight, but the glow grew brighter, as though stirred by breath, or presence, or thought. And when I laid my hand upon it—" He broke off, his eyes staring past Yusuf into the shadows. "It spoke." Yusuf's breath caught. "Spoke. Not in words," Nasiruddin murmured. "In light." He raised his trembling hand weakly, as if shielding himself from something only he could see. A pulse, like the beating of a heart. And within that pulse, shapes, letters, fragments of scripture that formed and dissolved like ripples in water. As if the stone remembered every hand that had touched it, every prayer carved into it, every secret whispered near its surface. His voice lowered to a rasp. There was a phrase carved beneath the visible text, too faint to be seen unless you looked with intention. It said, "For the children of light, not the children of kings." Yusuf felt his mouth go dry. "What does it mean?" Nasiruddin shook his head slowly. "It means the gospel in stone was not meant for rulers, not for emperors, not for conquerors. It was meant for those who sought truth without fear." His breathing grew labored, coming in short, painful gasps. "I tried to study it," he confessed. "I returned night after night. I learned its rhythm. I felt its heat. And then—" His hand trembled violently. "The dreams began." Yusuf leaned closer. "Dreams, visions," the old man whispered. "A light that filled everything. A voice that had no sound. A presence that felt ancient, compassionate, terrifying." He clutched Yusuf's robe weakly, pulling him closer still. "It was not meant to be touched by men of power. The Byzantine emperors hid it. The monks feared it. The Venetians died for it. And now," his voice cracked, "now the Ottomans will bury it deeper still. They believe it dangerous. They believe it heresy. They may be right." A long silence settled between them, broken only by Nasiruddin's strained breaths. Finally, the old man whispered, "But the truth is simple, Yusuf. The stone does not seek worship. It does not seek empire. It seeks only to be seen." His voice faded to a thin thread. "And it is not gone." Yusuf's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "The stone." Nasiruddin swallowed, his final strength draining. "It still moves." His hand fell limp. His eyes dimmed. The scholar of the Ottoman court was gone. Yusuf remained kneeling beside the bed, staring at the still fingers that moments earlier had clutched him with pleading urgency. Outside, the palace carried on with its usual clamor. Servants rushing, guards patrolling, scholars debating. But inside this room, something vast and unsettling hung in the air. Nasiruddin had not died from age. He had died from a truth too heavy for one mortal mind to bear. And the sapphire slab, whether hidden, stolen, or wandering, still waited somewhere in the empire, carrying within it the whispers of a gospel not meant for kings, but for those who dared to seek the true light. Paris in the 17th century was a restless city, half candlelit salons and philosophical debates, half-muddy streets and the clang of armor. Ideas moved through its narrow alleys like drifting smoke, slipping from scholars to diplomats to wandering monks who had somehow survived empires older than the stones beneath their feet. Among these travelers was a French diplomat named Aloy de Montferrand, a man whose curiosity often outweighed his political duties. Aloy had served in Constantinople during a delicate period of Ottoman-French negotiations. He had expected to bring back treaties, maps, perhaps a few curious relics to impress the intellectuals of Paris. He did not expect to return with a manuscript wrapped in thin goatskin parchment, tied with cord, and sealed with 2 broken circles of red wax. He purchased it from a Greek bookseller who appeared in the Istanbul marketplace like a ghost, thin, nervous, sweating despite the cold. The man claimed the manuscript had been copied from a set of old stones, hidden in an Anatolian monastery, stones that glowed faintly in darkness. The bookseller refused to say more. His eyes darted constantly toward the palace walls. Aloy recognized the look of a man who had touched something forbidden. He paid him quietly. The next morning, the bookseller was gone. Back in Paris, Aloy placed the manuscript on his desk, illuminated by a shaft of pale winter sunlight. The goatskin covering crackled faintly as he untied it. Dust rose from the first page, dust with a faint sparkle, as if it had once clung to stone. The text was written in Greek, not the fluid script of a practiced scribe, but something older, blockier, each letter formed with unusual precision. The parchment was thin, stretched nearly transparent, and the ink looked metallic, catching the light in a way Aloy had never seen. It was as if the words had been painted with powdered silver. The title at the top of the first page was simple, Eklagi 2 Lithia photo selections from the Stone of Light. Aloy felt a chill. He began reading. The passages did not resemble any gospel he knew. They were lyrical, cryptic, filled with metaphors of radiance and awakening. They spoke of a teacher whose voice was a mirror of the first dawn, and of a truth that burned without heat, shining even in the heart of shadows. One line stood out so sharply that Aloy copied it into his journal. Stone remembers what men fear to write. Over the next weeks, he studied the manuscript obsessively. His diplomatic duties suffered. His colleagues whispered that he had become withdrawn. His friends found him pale, distracted, his eyes flickering as if following invisible lights. One evening, he attended a gathering at the household of the Marquise de Sévigné, a patroness of literature who delighted in philosophical curiosities. The room was warm with firelight and laughter, the air thick with discussions of Descartes, Pascal, and the latest mathematical intrigues cutting through Europe. But Aloy could speak of nothing except the manuscript. "Show it to us," one scholar urged. "Let us see this strange Greek text you have found." After a moment's hesitation, Aloy agreed. The room fell silent as he placed the manuscript on the table. The scholars moved closer, bending over it. Some squinted, some frowned, some murmured that it seemed too poetic to be theological, too mystical to be historical, too structured to be apocryphal. Then an elderly linguist, renowned for his expertise in Byzantine Greek, leaned in, his brow furrowed. "This is not a modern hand," he whispered. "Nor is it medieval Latin Greek. The syntax, the phrasing, it is unmistakably Byzantine." Aloy felt his heartbeat quicken. Which century? The linguist hesitated. 9th, perhaps even earlier. A hush fell over the room. The Marquise's voice trembled. But that would place it in the era of iconoclast emperors. A dangerous era. Texts from that time were burned. "Precisely," the linguist whispered, "and this resembles none of the surviving works." Another scholar pointed at a passage. "Listen to this. The kingdom that binds itself in gold shall choke its own flame." Such a line would never appear in imperial texts. "This is subversive." "Heretical," murmured a priest. "Or prophetic," countered another. The room broke into argument. Was it a forgery? Was it the rambling of a mystic? Was it part of a lost gospel? Or was it something even more dangerous, an artifact of a suppressed movement that once threatened the theological order of Byzantium? That night, Aloy returned home more anxious than inspired. His discovery had stirred too much noise. He feared the church might take interest, or the royal censors, or worse, the Ottoman spies still scattered throughout Europe. He hid the manuscript beneath a loose stone in his fireplace. But secrets have gravity, and this one pulled. Over the following months, Aloy became increasingly withdrawn. His journals, preserved today in fragments, contained cryptic notes, sketches of strange symbols, and repeated references to the missing page and the voice behind the light. He wrote of dreams in which blue flames erupted from stone, revealing entire passages not visible in daylight. He began to suspect the manuscript was incomplete, that it had been copied from a larger work, carved, not written. One entry in his journal stood out starkly. The scribe writes that he was forbidden to copy the final section. He mentions a chapter describing the origin of the light, hidden from all but the most faithful. This missing section must exist somewhere. Aloy's obsession turned feverish. His handwriting deteriorated. He slept little. He spoke to himself in Greek. When friends visited, he stared at them as though seeing through their skin, searching for something that wasn't there. One cold January morning, Aloy disappeared. His door was found open, the fireplace cold. His journal lay on his desk, its last page stained with a dark blot of ink and marked with a single line. The light calls to itself. The manuscript was gone. No one saw Aloy again. Some speculated he fled Paris, chased by paranoia or heresy. Others believed he was abducted by agents of the Ottoman court, desperate to reclaim a secret they had failed to control. Still others whispered that he had stumbled too close to a truth that was never meant for human minds. Decades later, during a routine cataloging of the Bibliothèque du Roi, a librarian uncovered a forgotten folio containing 6 loose pages, written in Aloy's handwriting. They were translations, French renderings of selected lines from the manuscript. They were the only surviving evidence of the text he had found. And in the margins, faint but visible, Aloy had scribbled a final, chilling thought. The gospel is not lost. It waits. With that discovery, scholars realized a far stranger truth. The manuscript was not the source. It was merely an echo, a fragile shadow of words carved long ago into blue stone. And somewhere, the original gospel in sapphire still existed, still moved, still awakened, waiting for the next pair of hands bold enough or foolish enough to touch its light. The laboratory lights hummed faintly, their white glow reflecting off a row of metal tables covered in stone samples, fragments of pottery, and precisely labeled glass vials. This was not a place for myths or legends. This was a place where truth was measured in wavelengths, spectrums, and microscopic etchings. And yet, for the first time in centuries, the Sapphire Codex was about to be understood not by mystics or monks, but by scientists. The slab that lay beneath the magnification lens was no larger than a man's hand, one of the few surviving pieces attributed to the mysterious sapphire gospel. For decades it had bounced between private collections, universities, and museums, dismissed by most as a medieval curiosity. No one had considered it anything more than decorative religious art, until someone finally dared to look deeper. It began innocently enough with a graduate student at a small French research institute specializing in Byzantine metallurgy. Tasked with cataloging unusual mineral artifacts, she placed the sapphire fragment under a high-resolution spectroscope. What she saw made her breath catch. The inscriptions glowed, not with visible light but with a faint infrared fluorescence, something no natural sapphire should exhibit. The letters lit up like thin threads of heat trapped within the stone. Startled, she repeated the analysis. The glow remained. She ran additional scans, and the results spiraled into impossibility. The stone bore microscopic tool marks, tiny grooves so precise they shaved the threshold of what medieval instruments could achieve. Some grooves were too thin to be carved by hammered metal or chisel, too narrow even for traditional diamond tools. They resembled microabrasion patterns more akin to laser etching than medieval craftsmanship. But lasers did not exist in the 9th century. When she reported this anomaly to her supervisors, the slab was immediately transferred to a more advanced lab. There, under the cool hum of vacuum chambers and scanning electron microscopes, the impossible continued to unfold. First, the composition. The sapphire was pure. Too pure. Natural sapphires, even those of royal quality, contained tiny inclusions, gas bubbles, flecks of rutile, or trapped minerals. These were the fingerprints of geology. But this slab was almost unervingly flawless. If it were natural, it would have cost more than most noble estates. If it were synthetic, well, that technology was centuries away from the world that supposedly carved it. Next came the residues. Deep in the crevices of the carved letters lay microscopic traces of oil, dried, hardened, nearly crystallized. Scientists extracted samples so small they were practically invisible. When chemically analyzed, the residue matched a very specific composition used in Byzantine liturgical anointing oils. It was not random contamination. It was intentional. Whoever carved the stone had rubbed sacred oil into the grooves, perhaps to preserve the inscriptions, or sanctify them, or activate some symbolic quality. This discovery alone was astonishing. The odds of such a residue surviving centuries were infinitely small. Yet here it was, clinging stubbornly to the stone's deepest cuts like a memory refusing to fade. The scientific team grew silent around their instruments. What were they doing? One whispered. Why carve scripture into something that cannot burn, cannot rot? And how did they do it? The questions intensified when a digital surface scan revealed a second layer of inscriptions beneath the visible text. Microscopic symbols etched so faintly they were invisible to the naked eye. They formed delicate arcs and lines, reminiscent of early mystical diagrams. Some scholars suggested they were optical guides, used to direct light through specific portions of the stone. Others argued they were spiritual signatures, encoded blessings or warnings. But the most shocking discovery came from photoluminescence testing. When the sapphire fragment was exposed to specific wavelengths of light, something extraordinary happened. The inscriptions appeared to expand, as if the stone were revealing another set of letters hidden beneath its surface. The glowing patterns formed coherent Greek phrases, different from the ones carved visibly on the surface, like a ghost text embedded within the stone. It was a layered gospel, a scripture encoded in multiple dimensions, a message intended for those who understood light as well as words. One researcher stared at the luminescent text and whispered, "It's like it's responding." The notion was absurd. Stones did not respond. But the stone did not care what was absurd. Under certain conditions, the inscriptions altered. Under higher wavelengths, they formed symbols not seen since the days of Byzantine esotericism. Under lower wavelengths, they vanished entirely. When news of this leaked, carelessly, through a late-night conversation overheard by a curious intern, the academic world erupted. Most dismissed it as a fabrication, a misinterpretation, a trick of flawed equipment. But a small group of independent researchers took interest, including an optical physicist in Germany and a Byzantine anthropologist in Istanbul. Secretly collaborating, they arranged for further stones and fragments attributed to the Sapphire Codex to undergo similar tests. The results were the same. Medieval engravings should not behave like this. Sapphire should not act as a memory bank. Scripture should not glow in the infrared spectrum. Under the cold precision of modern science, the Sapphire Codex did not become less mysterious. It became more impossible. Even more unsettling was the discovery made during structural tomography scans. Deep within the crystalline lattice of one fragment, far beyond any human tool's reach, was a pattern. A hairline fissure shaped like a curve, repeating every few millimeters. It was not natural. It resembled something crafted. The researchers debated for weeks. Some believed it to be a flaw introduced during carving. Others believed it was part of the codex's hidden structure, an intentional resonance line designed to hold or react to light in a particular way. And then the physicist proposed a terrifying possibility. What if the inscriptions weren't carved into the stone? What if they were carved from within it? The idea should have been dismissed instantly. But the team had already crossed so many scientific boundaries that they did not dismiss anything anymore. The anthropologist wrote a single line in her private notes, a line scholars much later would cite as the turning point between myth and reality. We assumed the stone was chosen for the gospel, but perhaps the gospel chose the stone. When the final results were compiled, they formed a conclusion no one wanted to say aloud. The Sapphire Codex was real. Not metaphor, not legend, not forgery. A gospel carved, somehow, into sapphire in the Byzantine era, using techniques that should not have existed. A work designed to survive centuries. A message meant to awaken slowly, revealed not through faith alone, but through light, time, and human curiosity. Science had stripped away the fog of myth, but what it revealed was far stranger than anyone expected. The gospel in blue stone had always been waiting for someone with the tools to finally see it. Hadrian's gardens are among the villa's most enchanting and enigmatic features, and they may hold some of the clearest clues to the hidden chamber's location. At first glance, the gardens appear as a showcase of wealth and aesthetic mastery. Carefully sculpted hedges, vibrant floral arrangements, and tranquil pools that reflect the sky. Yet beneath this serene exterior lies a more deliberate, almost cryptic design. Paths twist and turn unpredictably, hedges block sightlines, and statues are placed with precise but puzzling orientation. Every element of the gardens seems to have a dual purpose: beauty for casual observers, and subtle guidance for those who know how to read the landscape. Certain walkways in the villa's gardens appear to be carefully aligned with structural anomalies or architectural markers within the villa itself. Scholars have noted that a straight path might terminate at a fountain or a statue positioned in such a way that it points toward a particular section of a wall or an irregularity in the ground. Others observe that certain alignments coincide with mosaics or inscriptions, suggesting that movement through the gardens was intended to be a journey of perception as much as a stroll for leisure. Hadrian, known for his love of both art and philosophy, seems to have orchestrated a narrative in which the gardens guide visitors subtly, preparing them, perhaps unknowingly, for the discovery of the hidden chamber. Water, once again, plays a central role in this carefully choreographed experience. Reflective pools capture the sky in ways that reveal hidden patterns or create optical illusions, manipulating perception to suggest the presence or absence of doors, pathways, or mechanisms. Fountains are often placed so that sunlight striking the water at a certain hour illuminates mosaics or carvings previously obscured in shadow. It is conceivable that Hadrian designed these water features to act as signaling devices, marking the way to secret spaces while maintaining their concealment from casual observers. The interplay of reflection, light, and shadow transforms the gardens into a living puzzle, a sensory experience that is both beautiful and intellectually challenging. Statues within the gardens appear deliberately oriented toward anomalies or hidden markers. In some cases, a statue's gaze or gesture aligns with an architectural irregularity, a mosaic, or a distant pool. This deliberate positioning transforms the garden into a symbolic map, guiding the perceptive visitor toward areas of interest. Scholars have suggested that these statues function as more than decoration. They are part of a coded system, one that rewards careful observation and intellectual engagement. In essence, the gardens become a narrative device, a story written in stone, water, and greenery, leading toward the hidden chamber. The villa's gardens also contain elements suggestive of ritual or contemplation. Enclosed courtyards, secluded nooks, and small altars or pedestals may have served as spaces for meditation, philosophical reflection, or private ceremonies. These areas, often adjacent to potential hidden access points, hint at a connection between the chamber and Hadrian's intellectual or spiritual pursuits. Some scholars propose that the chamber itself may have been part of a broader contemplative or ceremonial network, with the gardens functioning as both a preparatory space and a conduit to the secretive inner sanctum. Seasonal variation appears to have been an integral part of the garden's design. Certain pathways, fountains, and reflective surfaces interact differently depending on the time of year, the position of the sun, or even the phases of the moon. It is plausible that the hidden chamber was designed to be revealed, or at least hinted at, only during specific celestial alignments. This temporal element reinforces the notion that Hadrian's villa was not static. It was a dynamic environment, one that combined architecture, landscape, and astronomical knowledge to create experiences that were at once practical, aesthetic, and enigmatic. Some scholars have turned to the ancient practice of sacred geometry for insight into the garden's design. Measurements and alignments within the pathways, fountains, and hedges may correspond to mathematical or cosmological principles, embedding symbolic meaning in the layout. Certain ratios or angles appear repeatedly, suggesting that Hadrian employed geometry as a code, connecting the garden's physical form to philosophical, spiritual, or cosmological concepts. In this context, the hidden chamber is not only a physical location but a culmination of layered meaning, discovered not through brute force or chance, but through understanding the underlying principles of design, symmetry, and symbolism. The garden's architecture also incorporates sensory manipulation. Fragrances from plants, the sound of water, and the play of light and shadow were likely intended to create a heightened awareness in visitors, subtly influencing perception and focus. Imagine walking a path where the scent of flowers grows stronger near a mosaic that hints at a hidden entrance, or where the gentle trickle of a fountain masks subtle sounds emanating from a concealed passage. These deliberate sensory cues create an immersive environment in which observation and intuition are rewarded, encouraging exploration while concealing secrets from those inattentive to subtle detail. Even the placement of benches, pedestals, and other garden features may contribute to the villa's hidden design. Seated in precisely the right location, a visitor might notice alignments, reflections, or inscriptions that otherwise go unnoticed. From this perspective, Hadrian's gardens are an interactive space, designed to reveal their secrets gradually, through engagement, patience, and careful attention. It is a demonstration of the emperor's understanding of human psychology, blending curiosity with misdirection to protect the chamber while guiding those capable of discovery. Finally, the gardens reinforce the theme of the villa as a narrative device. Each element, pathways, statues, pools, inscriptions, and alignments, interacts with the others to create a layered story, one that unfolds across space and time. Movement through the gardens is not accidental. It is an orchestrated journey, a sequence of perceptions and realizations that culminate, perhaps, in the threshold of the hidden chamber. To understand the gardens is to begin understanding Hadrian himself, a man who combined intellect, artistry, and secrecy to create spaces that communicate across centuries. In conclusion, Hadrian's gardens are more than ornamental landscapes. They are a living map, a dynamic system of cues and misdirections designed to interact with perception, intellect, and time. Within these carefully curated spaces, the paths, pools, statues, and alignments all converge toward something greater. The hidden chamber, a space that embodies secrecy, intellect, and deliberate artistry. As modern scholars continue to explore these gardens, they are reminded that each step, each glance, and each observation may bring them closer to a revelation that has eluded the world for centuries. Hadrian's fascination with the cosmos is well documented, and the villa itself may serve as a testament to his engagement with celestial patterns. The possibility that the hidden chamber aligns with specific astronomical events has intrigued scholars for decades. Sunlight streaming through a window, moonlight falling at a precise angle, or shadows cast by statues and architectural features at certain times of the year could all serve as intentional signals or even keys to entry. It is not far-fetched to imagine that Hadrian, who combined intellectual curiosity with meticulous design, incorporated the heavens into the very fabric of his villa, weaving together art, architecture, and astronomy in a way that few could fully decipher. Ground surveys and modern simulations have revealed remarkable patterns suggesting intentional alignments with the sun and moon. Certain corridors and windows appear to channel sunlight toward walls, mosaics, or inscriptions only during solstices or equinoxes. Shadows cast by statues, columns, or even subtle architectural protrusions may reveal clues or mark the passage to hidden areas at precise moments. These phenomena suggest that the hidden chamber was not merely a static location. It was designed to interact with the celestial clock, a dynamic space that emerges fully only when the heavens align with the villa's architecture. The villa's orientation itself may hold significance. Ancient Roman architects often employed principles of orientation and alignment, both for practical purposes, such as ventilation, lighting, and comfort, and for symbolic or spiritual reasons. Hadrian, who traveled extensively and absorbed influences from Greece, Egypt, and the Near East, may have incorporated these principles into the villa's design. Alignments with the rising or setting sun, specific stars, or planetary movements could create moments when secret passages, inscriptions, or mechanisms reveal themselves. Such precision implies not only advanced architectural skill but a profound understanding of astronomy and its integration with human perception. Some scholars suggest that the celestial design extends to the hidden chamber itself. Windows, skylights, or slits may have been positioned so that sunlight or moonlight illuminates a specific mosaic, inscription, or doorway at a precise time. Consider the possibility that only on the day of the winter solstice does a beam of sunlight fall upon a tile that marks the threshold to the chamber, or that moonlight, reflecting off a pool or water feature, casts a coded pattern that signals the entrance. In this way, the villa functions as both a temporal and spatial puzzle, where knowledge of the cosmos is essential to unlocking its secrets. The interplay between celestial events and architectural features is complemented by symbolic elements throughout the villa. Certain mosaics, frescoes, or reliefs depict stars, constellations, or cosmic cycles, suggesting that Hadrian sought to embed meaning in both visible and hidden spaces. These celestial references may serve as guides, philosophical statements, or warnings, reinforcing the idea that the hidden chamber was intended not only as a repository, but as a reflection of the emperor's intellectual and spiritual worldview. In this sense, the chamber is as much a conceptual creation as it is a physical one, a place where observation of the heavens becomes a key to understanding. Astronomical alignments also intersect with the villa's gardens and water features. Pools and fountains may act as reflective surfaces, redirecting sunlight or moonlight toward architectural anomalies, inscriptions, or hidden entrances. Certain hedges, statues, and pathways are oriented to interact with these reflections, creating a choreography of light and shadow that guides the perceptive observer. This integration of landscape, architecture, and celestial phenomena suggests that Hadrian's villa was conceived as a multisensory, multidimensional environment, where secrets are revealed only to those capable of perceiving the connections between natural forces and human design. The hidden chamber, if indeed tied to celestial events, may have functioned as a contemplative or ceremonial space aligned with astronomical cycles. Solstices, equinoxes, and lunar phases could have dictated specific rituals, readings, or reflections within the chamber. Sunlight illuminating inscriptions at certain times may have been interpreted as divine affirmation, while moonlight reflecting on mosaics could have guided meditative practices. In this context, the chamber is not only a repository of knowledge or treasures, but a tool for introspection, a space in which the rhythms of the cosmos intersect with human consciousness. Evidence of such alignments is subtle and often indirect. Slight deviations in wall orientation, unusual placements of windows or apertures, and recurring symbolic motifs all hint at the integration of celestial principles. Modern tools, such as 3D modeling and astronomical simulation software, have allowed researchers to reconstruct the villa's celestial interactions, revealing patterns that might have gone unnoticed by previous generations. Yet even with these technologies, interpretation remains speculative. The full extent of Hadrian's intent is still shrouded, leaving room for imagination, debate, and ongoing exploration. The emperor's engagement with astronomy reflects a broader philosophical vision. For Hadrian, the cosmos may have represented order, permanence, and a connection between human endeavor and universal law. The hidden chamber, integrated into this vision, becomes a microcosm of the universe itself, a space of structure, secrecy, and symbolic resonance. Its concealment and potential alignment with celestial events suggest that Hadrian intended it to be discovered gradually, intellectually, and spiritually, rather than through force or casual observation. This layered design reinforces the chamber's mystique, bridging the gap between human ingenuity and cosmic order. Ultimately, the celestial dimension of Hadrian's villa adds a profound layer of meaning to the hidden chamber. It is not simply a room concealed behind walls or mechanisms. It is a space connected to time, the heavens, and human perception. Every alignment, reflection, and symbolic reference points toward a synthesis of art, architecture, philosophy, and astronomy, demonstrating Hadrian's remarkable capacity to orchestrate complex systems of knowledge and experience. The chamber, in this light, is a testament to his intellect, curiosity, and understanding of both human and cosmic order. A secret that is as conceptual as it is physical, waiting for discovery by those capable of interpreting the celestial codes embedded within the villa. It began with a whisper in the archives of the Bibliotheca Apostolica Vaticana, a whisper that should never have reached the outside world. A single sheet of parchment, folded into quarters and tucked inside a leather-bound volume of theological correspondence from the late Renaissance. No signature, no insignia, no seal, just ink grown brown with the passing of centuries. A librarian found it by accident. He should have catalogued it quietly, logged it into the system, filed it under anonymous fragments, and moved on. But the Vatican had trained its archivists too well. They could sense danger the way soldiers sense the tension before battle. And the moment his eyes fell on the parchment, he knew it was not a misplaced letter or a clerical error. It was something someone had wanted hidden. He read it once, then again. On the third reading, his hands began to tremble. The letter referenced something called Libris Sapphirinis, the sapphire books. Not one, multiple. His breath grew shallow. The wording was careful, almost coded. It warned the unnamed recipient that certain Romanum relics circulating through Europe were to be avoided, dismissed, or quietly confiscated. It cautioned theologians against being enchanted by illusions of blue fire. It urged immediate reporting if any scholars encountered the writings carved into heavenly stone. It said, above all else, such objects, if genuine, contain doctrines contrary to the unity and authority of Holy Mother Church. The archivist froze. Doctrines contrary, unity and authority, carved into stone. He looked around the quiet archive room, the shelves towering above him like silent judges. The Vatican Library held thousands of forbidden writings, strange cosmologies, apocryphal gospels, manuscripts condemned by councils long buried in history. But this was different. This was not a text. It was a warning. And warnings in the Vatican were never issued lightly. He turned the parchment over. There was more. A final line written in smaller, tighter script, almost as if the author had pressed his quill carefully to avoid being overheard even by the parchment itself. If one must be preserved for study, keep it away from light. Away from light. The archivist's mouth went dry. He folded the parchment slowly, as though afraid it might burn his fingers, and carried it to his superior. Within hours, the letter disappeared from the library catalog. By dawn the next day, the original librarian had been reassigned to a distant basilica in Umbria. His replacement asked no questions. Yet nothing stays hidden forever. A digital copy leaked. A grainy photograph taken before the reassignment. A blurred upload that was soon deleted but not before being captured by the the wrong people. Scholars whispered. Journalists speculated. Conspiracy theorists erupted. But none of them understood the true weight of the letter, not until a researcher in Vienna recognized one detail. The handwriting. It matched the script of Cardinal Alvise Orsini, a figure infamous for overseeing the Vatican's suppression of unorthodox artifacts in the late 16th century. Orsini had been responsible for collecting and destroying heretical documents across southern Europe. His fearlessness was legendary. His ruthlessness equally so. If he wrote this letter, the Sapphire Gospel had reached the Vatican and frightened it. The implications rippled outward like shockwaves. For centuries, the Church had denied the existence of any blue gospel. They had dismissed the Paris manuscript as an elaborate forgery. They had rejected claims of glowing stones or coded inscriptions. They insisted that Scripture was written in ink on parchment, through the authority of councils and saints, not carved into sapphire by unknown hands. But this letter said otherwise. It proved the Church had known about the sapphire texts, not merely suspected but known. They had seen at least one slab. They had studied it, and they had feared it. The wording of the letter became the focus of intense scrutiny. Scholars debated every phrase. Why unity? Why authority? Why bring no attention to the illusions of blue fire? Why keep it away from light? One theologian suggested that the church believed the stone reacted to illumination, that its inscriptions changed or awakened when exposed. Another theorized that the Vatican worried about scholars being seduced by its message, a message that elevated individual enlightenment over institutional power. But the most chilling interpretation came from a linguist who specialized in ecclesiastical Latin. He pointed to a single phrase, "Si virus est." If it is genuine, he argued the wording implied fear, not certainty. That phrase means the church did not destroy the stone, he said quietly. It means they kept it, locked it away, somewhere only the highest authority could reach. He paused. And if Orsini wrote this letter, then it means the Vatican encountered the Sapphire Gospel during the same period the Ottomans lost track of it. Two empires, two fears, one mysterious moving relic. Theories blossomed, but one lingered at the center of them all. The church did not fear the Sapphire Gospel because it was false. They feared it because it might be true, because if divine light lived within every soul equally, if salvation required no priest, if revelation could carve itself into stone without human permission, then the church's greatest claim, its exclusive authority, would fracture. The letter was eventually dismissed as misinterpreted, the librarian's reassignment called routine, and the entire event smoothed over by Vatican spokesmen with the elegance of practiced denial. But truth has a way of refusing burial. The digital copy still circulates. Scholars still argue. And every year, a few more researchers find themselves drawn to the Sapphire mystery, compelled by a whisper of blue light. A whisper that insists the Codex is not lost, only hidden, and somewhere, perhaps in a vault, perhaps in the earth, perhaps waiting for another seeker, the stone still remembers. Yet the empire's influence persisted in subtle ways, shaping cultural practices, architectural styles, and governance strategies of later societies. Symbols, rituals, and philosophical ideas carried forward into subsequent dynasties, demonstrating the endurance of concepts even when their physical embodiments vanished. The dragon, once a central emblem of authority, wisdom, and protection, survived as a cultural motif, highlighting the power of ideas to outlast empires. Psychological and cultural strategies were integral to the empire's cohesion. Temples and public spaces were deliberately designed to reinforce authority and shared belief systems. Rituals created a sense of belonging and purpose, fostering loyalty and compliance among diverse populations. Secretive practices ensured that knowledge and power remained concentrated among a select few, preserving social hierarchies and maintaining control over the empire's narrative. This combination of psychological insight, cultural influence, and political structure reflects a civilization that understood the interplay between belief, perception, and governance, an understanding that contributed both to its success and its eventual vulnerabilities. Artifacts scattered across the landscape reveal intentional manipulation of perception and memory. Roads directed travelers along routes that emphasized imperial symbolism, bridges created visual continuity between key sites, and ceremonial spaces aligned with celestial events to convey divine legitimacy. Burial practices were similarly strategic, with tombs positioned to communicate authority and influence beyond the immediate community. These methods suggest that the empire's leaders sought not merely to govern the present, but to shape collective memory, ensuring that their ideals would echo through generations even if the empire itself eventually fell. Yet, despite these sophisticated strategies, the empire could not withstand the combined pressures of rebellion, environmental disruption, and the inevitable erosion of time. Settlements decayed, trade networks collapsed, and centralized authority weakened. The fall was neither sudden nor violent in every instance. It was a complex process of attrition, punctuated by moments of upheaval and adaptation. The traces left behind, ruins, artifacts, inscriptions, serve as both evidence of human achievement and cautionary reminders of the fragility inherent in even the most brilliant systems of governance. The emotional resonance of the empire's story is profound. There is awe in the scale of its ambition, fascination in the sophistication of its organization, and tragedy in its eventual dissolution. Its remnants provoke reflection on the impermanence of human achievement and the enduring power of ideas. Even in absence, The empire communicates lessons about creativity, resilience, and the ways in which human societies navigate ambition, environment, and collective memory. The scattered pieces of its story invite empathy, curiosity, and a sense of connection across centuries. Finally, the empire's legacy challenges contemporary perceptions of history. It demonstrates that civilizations are not static, that influence can persist even when physical structures and political systems collapse. Artifacts, oral traditions, and cultural diffusion serve as enduring markers of an empire's existence, reminding us that history is not solely written in chronicles and official records, but also in the intangible transmission of ideas, beliefs, and symbols. The Dragon Empire's story is a testament to the enduring human capacity to create, imagine, and shape the world, even when time and circumstance threaten to erase those efforts from memory. Standing at the edge of the empire's ruins, one feels a profound connection to those who came before. The stones, inscriptions, and symbols are more than relics. They are voices, speaking across centuries, urging modern observers to consider the fleeting nature of power, the persistence of culture, and the resilience of human imagination. The Dragon Empire, though long vanished, continues to resonate in these echoes, compelling us to explore, to question, and to marvel at what humans are capable of achieving. In contemplating its rise and fall, we are reminded that the boundaries of history are porous. What seems lost may still influence the present. What appears forgotten may shape future generations. And in the silent testimonies of the Dragon Empire, we find not only a cautionary tale but also a source of inspiration. The realization that even in impermanence, there is meaning, and even in silence, there is voice. The discovery began with a photograph, grainy, overexposed, taken by a restless traveler who didn't know he had captured something extraordinary. It surfaced on a tiny archaeology forum, posted without context, a throwaway image from an abandoned mine somewhere in the mountains of eastern Anatolia. The traveler had intended only to show the eerie beauty of a forgotten tunnel, its walls slick with mineral deposits and the dull gleam of quartz veins. But one responder noticed something else. In the corner of the image, half hidden behind a collapsed beam, a faint glimmer of blue. At first, the glimmer looked like nothing more than a trick of moisture and mineral reflection. But the shape, rectangular, sharp-edged, caught the attention of an amateur historian in Greece. He enhanced the image, filtered the light, zoomed until the pixels blurred. His breath caught. The blue was not diffuse. It was concentrated. It was glowing from within, not reflecting from without. He posted his findings. The forum dismissed him. He posted again. Still dismissed. But on the third attempt, a private message appeared in his inbox. It was from a researcher who claimed to work with geological surveys in Turkey. She asked for the coordinates of the mine, not publicly, not on the forum, but privately. When he hesitated, she told him something that chilled him. This is not the first blue artifact found in the mountains, only the first photographed. That message was the spark. Soon a small, unofficial expedition was formed, 3 researchers, 2 locals familiar with the terrain, and 1 historian who had studied the Byzantine monastic routes across Anatolia. They met quietly in a border town, exchanged only first names, and set out toward the abandoned mine under a pale morning sun. The path was treacherous, a narrow cut through steep cliffs where loose stones skittered underfoot. The mine itself had been carved centuries earlier by miners seeking silver, but it had long since collapsed in sections, leaving only a series of narrow tunnels and hollow chambers waiting like skeletal ribs beneath the earth. The deeper they descended, the colder the air became. Their flashlights caught flecks of mica, beads of moisture, and the silent faces of ancient beams swollen with age. Every footstep echoed, bouncing down corridors that once rang with the noise of chisels and hammers. They reached the chamber seen in the photograph. It was larger than expected, a dome-like hollow where miners had attempted to chase a vein of silver that ended abruptly in a wall of fractured stone. Debris covered the floor. A broken wooden support beam lay twisted near the center, and behind it, something glinted. They approached slowly. At first it seemed like a piece of polished mineral, a chunk of lapis lazuli or blue corundum embedded in granite. But as their flashlight beams converged, the glow strengthened, pulsing faintly as if responding to the sudden presence of light. The historian whispered, "It can't be." The blue shape was unmistakably artificial. A stone slab, a fragment, edges too straight to be natural, surface too smooth to be weathered. One of the researchers knelt, brushing debris aside. The slab was shattered, only a corner exposed. The surface bore faint markings, lines, curves, symbols. Greek letters, though eroded by time. The historian leaned closer, breath trembling. "It's a page," he whispered. "A page from the Codex." But that raised more questions than it answered. How had a sapphire page ended up buried in a mine? Had the Byzantines hidden pieces of the Codex across the mountains? Had someone transported it centuries later and lost it here? Or had it moved, again, on its own unpredictable trajectory, the way it seemed to move through history, slipping between hands and across borders as if guided? The researchers cleared more rubble. Beneath the broken beam, they found additional shards, tiny, triangular, translucent blue fragments that shone faintly. Some pieces were no larger than fingernails, yet they glowed with the same inner luminescence described in old accounts from Venice and Constantinople. One fragment held a single etched letter that appeared only when light struck it at a specific angle. Another fragment revealed a microscopic swirl of symbols, so small the human eye could barely discern them. They bagged each piece carefully, handling them as though they were living creatures. When they touched the largest fragment, the mine chamber seemed to vibrate faintly, so faintly they thought it might be imagination. But the vibration came again, a soft hum, like a distant string being plucked. The historian stepped back quickly. "It's reacting," he said. The geologist knelt beside him. "To what?" No one could answer. As they prepared to excavate further, one of the local guides noticed something on the chamber wall, a set of shallow carvings. Not mining marks, purposeful. He brushed away dust, revealing a series of symbols etched into the stone itself. 3 lines radiating from a central point. The same symbol found on the Cappadocian fragment. The same symbol copied centuries ago by Brother Isidoros. The same symbol that haunted the Paris manuscript. The same symbol sketched in the final notebook of Dr. Alenia Vrakas. The historian stared at it in stunned silence. "This mine wasn't just a mine," he whispered. "Someone used it. Someone hid something here. The symbol was no accident. Someone had marked the chamber to warn or guide those who came after. But had they hidden the sapphire slab here, or died here trying to retrieve it?" Near the wall lay a rusted Byzantine belt buckle, half buried in dust. A hint, a clue, a ghost. They photographed everything, collected what fragments they safely could, marked the chamber for further study. When they finally stepped out of the mine into the sunlight, the blue fragments glowed briefly as if savoring the warmth. That night, back in the safe house, they examined the pieces under controlled light. The results stunned them. Some inscriptions appeared only under ultraviolet light. Others responded to infrared. Others vibrated faintly when exposed to specific sound frequencies. A layered gospel, a crystalline scripture revealing itself like petals unfolding. One researcher whispered, "This wasn't meant for a single era. It was meant for whoever could reach this level of understanding." The historian stared at the glowing fragments, eyes wide with both awe and fear. "If this is only a corner," he said softly, "what happens when we find the rest?" He did not know that as he spoke somewhere far away, in a monastery, a vault, or a forgotten archive, the other pieces of the Sapphire Codex shimmered faintly, as if sensing that the world was finally catching up, as if awakening. The hidden chamber, as a repository of secrets and symbols, was not merely a private indulgence. It existed within a world of political tension, intrigue, and potential betrayal. Hadrian's Rome was a place of immense power, where alliances were fragile, loyalties shifted like sand, and information was currency more valuable than gold. Within this context, the chamber may have functioned as both sanctuary and safeguard, holding documents, artifacts, or knowledge that could destabilize the empire if mishandled. To understand the chamber is to understand not only Hadrian's genius but also the precarious world in which he operated, a world in which secrecy was essential to survival. Hadrian was acutely aware of the threats around him. Senators, generals, and provincial governors all held varying degrees of power and influence, and the emperor's decisions often provoked envy, ambition, or dissent. Letters, reports, and sensitive documents may have been stored in the hidden chamber, detailing plots, allegiances, and betrayals. If exposed, such information could have toppled careers, incited rebellion, or even threatened the emperor's life. The chamber, then, is as much a fortress as it is a reflection of Hadrian's intellect, a place where control over knowledge equated to control over destiny. Historical records hint at tensions within Hadrian's inner circle. Trusted advisors sometimes became rivals, confidants occasionally turned traitors, and the emperor had to navigate a delicate web of relationships to maintain authority. It is plausible that the chamber contained not only administrative or strategic materials but also personal correspondences, letters revealing private sentiments, philosophical debates, or candid opinions about the empire and its leaders. Such documents would have been invaluable for understanding the political landscape, and equally dangerous if discovered by the wrong person. Hadrian's foresight in protecting them underscores his understanding of human nature, ambition, and the fragility of trust. The human stakes surrounding the chamber extend beyond political power to matters of personal loyalty and betrayal. Servants, aides, and courtiers, aware of its existence, may have been required to navigate complex instructions, interpret coded messages, or perform specific rituals to gain access. In a society where failure or indiscretion could result in severe consequences, the chamber would have been a crucible of obedience, observation, and discretion. Those who entered, or attempted to enter, without the emperor's guidance risked exposure, disgrace, or worse. The chamber's very existence is a testament to Hadrian's recognition of the danger inherent in knowledge and the necessity of controlling who could possess it. Some historians speculate that the chamber may have also contained sensitive information about succession, alliances, or military strategy. Rome's borders were vast, and the empire faced constant threats from external forces as well as internal unrest. Plans for troop deployments, fortifications, or diplomatic maneuvers could have been documented in the chamber, making it a critical node of imperial security. Its concealment would ensure that vital knowledge remained protected, accessible only to those with both authorization and understanding. In this sense, the chamber functioned as a safeguard for the empire itself, a repository of power and foresight meticulously hidden within the villa's labyrinthine design. The emotional stakes for those close to Hadrian cannot be overlooked. Courtiers, confidants, and servants would have been acutely aware of the risks surrounding the chamber. A single misstep, misinterpretation of a symbol, misplacement of an artifact, or revelation of a secret path could lead to personal ruin. This environment of tension and vigilance creates a human drama that is as compelling as the architectural and symbolic intrigue. The hidden chamber, therefore, is not only a space of intellectual challenge but a stage for human psychology, where loyalty, ambition, and fear converge. Betrayal, in particular, may have been a constant concern. Hadrian's own experiences with intrigue and rebellion likely informed the villa's design, leading him to embed layers of deception, misdirection, and concealment. False panels, misaligned mosaics, and deliberately misleading pathways may have served as safeguards against discovery by those with malicious intent. The architecture itself becomes a mechanism of trust and mistrust, a reflection of the emperor's understanding that power is most vulnerable when knowledge is accessible to those who would exploit it. Political intrigue also intersects with philosophy and symbolism within the villa. Hadrian's use of allegory, mosaics, and celestial alignment may have been designed not only to protect the chamber but also to convey subtle messages about governance, morality, and the nature of power. A careful observer could glean insights into the emperor's philosophy, his perspective on loyalty and justice, and the principles by which he governed. In this way, the chamber operates simultaneously as a repository of sensitive information, a protective device, and a reflection of Hadrian's worldview. Stories of hidden betrayal circulate in ancient accounts, often veiled in rumor or myth, but they hint at the stakes surrounding the emperor's secrets. Courtiers who overstepped boundaries or misread instructions were likely dealt with quietly, reinforcing the necessity of discretion and obedience. The hidden chamber, therefore, embodies both physical and social control. It protects knowledge while regulating access through a combination of architectural ingenuity and human understanding. To enter the chamber was to engage not only with mechanics and symbolism but with a system of trust, loyalty, and calculated risk. Even Hadrian himself was not immune to the pressures of political intrigue. Personal letters, recorded speeches, and anecdotal accounts suggest a ruler deeply aware of the dangers surrounding him, one who understood that intelligence was both a weapon and a liability. Dawn approached like a slow exhale, brushing its pale breath across the eastern horizon. The mountains surrounding the research cabin remained dark silhouettes, their ridges sharp and unmoving against the softening sky. Inside the cabin, the air was tense, too still, too clean, as though the world had paused in anticipation of what the first ray of sunlight would reveal. The fragments lay on the stone tray by the window, arranged in a loose arc. Their faint blue glow pulsed softly, irregularly, like the half-conscious murmurs of a sleeper about to wake. The historian was already awake. Not that he had truly slept. He had spent the night replaying that moment. The warmth beneath the stone, the shimmer that had flowed across its surface like a silent wave. Logic tried to dismiss it as fatigue or imagination, but deep in his bones he knew. Something had changed in the fragments. Something had stirred. As the sky brightened from black to blue, the others emerged from their rooms one by one. The physicist rubbed sleep from her eyes, blinking against the early light. The geologist moved stiffly, clutching a notebook already filled with questions. The anthropologist wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, muttering prayers in a language older than borders. Even the two local guides, hardened by mountain winters and older fears, stood near the door with a mixture of caution and quiet reverence. No one spoke loudly. Their voices remained hushed, as though they feared waking something too suddenly. The historian cleared his throat. "It's time." The physicist approached the window and pulled open the wooden shutters. A rush of cold morning air swept into the room, carrying with it the scent of pine and wet earth. The horizon brightened further, yellow now, washed in rosy undertones. The first ray of sunlight stretched across the sky like a golden finger, touched the mountain peak, slid down the slope, crept toward the cabin. The historian felt his pulse quicken. "Prepare the instruments." The physicist raised the spectroscope. The geologist poised a thermal sensor. The anthropologist gripped her notebook with white knuckles. The light reached the windowsill. It paused, just for a heartbeat, as though hesitating before crossing an invisible threshold. Then it fell upon the fragments. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the room filled with a sound so faint it hovered just above silence. A vibration, a hum, like a bow drawn gently across a glass rim. Every hair on the historian's arms rose. The physicist inhaled sharply. The blue fragments began to glow. Not brightly, not violently, but steadily, radiating a soft, luminous pulse that seemed to synchronize with the rhythm of their own breath. The geologist whispered, "Measure it." The physicist adjusted her scope, but the results on her screen flickered and blurred, as though the device could not keep up with the shifting frequencies. The anthropologist stepped closer, eyes widening. "Look!" The largest fragment, still bearing clear inscriptions, began to change color. The deep sapphire darkened, then lightened, then shimmered with a faint opalescent sheen. The carved letters glowed brighter, arranged in flowing Greek that seemed to move even though the stone remained perfectly still. Then something extraordinary happened. The inscriptions changed. The letters, not carved by hand, not etched by human tools, began to shift their arrangement. Not physically, not mechanically, but optically. As though a second layer of text were blooming from beneath the first, rising to the surface like a ghost rising through still water. "How is that possible?" the physicist breathed. The historian felt his chest tighten. "The missing layer," he whispered. "The hidden text." For centuries, Scholars had theorized that the Sapphire Codex contained multiple layers of meaning, some visible, some latent, some accessible only under the right conditions. The conditions were here, in this sunrise, in this light, in this moment. The anthropologist stepped forward, heart pounding. "Read it," she urged, "before it fades." The historian leaned close. The layer beneath the primary text formed slowly, each word blooming like fire spreading across a field of shadows. Greek letters, ancient, perfect, revealing a message buried for 1,000 years. His lips moved silently as he deciphered the first line. "In the beginning was not the Word, but the light from which word arises." He froze. That sentence alone contradicted centuries of orthodox theology. It placed illumination, a kind of primal radiance, before language, before scripture, before creation as understood by human tradition. He swallowed hard and continued reading. The first breath carved the radiance into form, and memory into stone. "Let he who seeks truth follow not the kings of earth but the light within." The anthropologist gasped. "That's it," she whispered. "The teaching the emperors feared." The geologist's voice shook. "There's more, look." The inscriptions continued to transform, revealing a third layer, deeper still, forming from shifting luminous pathways inside the sapphire lattice itself. The physicist lifted her camera, but the recording software glitched, unable to capture the phenomenon. Her instruments stuttered, failing to compute readings that fluctuated far beyond expected limits. "It's rewriting itself," she murmured, "or revealing itself, or, God help me, remembering itself." The historian read on, voice trembling. "A kingdom of stone falls. A kingdom of light endures. No ruler may claim the first illumination. It belongs to the soul alone." The room grew still, utterly still. The implications were seismic. If this text was genuine, and everything in the room suggested it was, it challenged the structure of every institution that had ever tried to control divine truth. It undermined theological authority, imperial power, ecclesiastical hierarchy. It offered revelation without mediators, illumination without permission, awakening without empire. The historian exhaled in awe. This is what they tried to hide." The anthropologist nodded, eyes glistening. "This is why it moved, why it vanished, why every empire feared it." The physicist checked the fragments again. "The glow is changing. We're losing the second layer." The sunlight had shifted, just enough. The inscriptions began to fade, retreating back into the crystalline depths like nocturnal creatures returning to their caves. The hum softened. The light dimmed. The glow settled into its original faint pulse. And then the room went silent, completely silent. The historian stepped back, overwhelmed. His voice trembled with a mixture of reverence and terror when he finally spoke. "We just witnessed the missing chapter." The physicist stared at the fragments in disbelief. "We barely understood what we saw." The anthropologist closed her notebook with shaking hands. "But now we know why the Codex survived. Why it endured war, fire, empire, exile." The historian looked at the blue fragments, no longer glowing, but somehow more alive than ever. "It wasn't meant for the 9th century, he whispered. "It wasn't meant for Venice, or the Ottomans, or the Vatican." He swallowed hard. "It was meant for us, for a world that could finally see light the way they carved it." The cabin fell quiet again as the morning sun climbed higher, indifferent to the revelation it had just awakened. But inside the sapphire fragments, beneath the layers of stone and silence, the gospel waited still, as if preparing for the next question humanity would dare to ask. Night had fallen softly over the mountains, wrapping the research cabin in a hush so complete it felt sacred. Inside, the team sat around the table, each of them staring at the sapphire fragments as if waiting for them to breathe again. Hours had passed since the dawn revelation, yet no one could shake the memory of the shifting inscriptions, the hidden gospel rising from the depths of the stone. The historian kept glancing toward the case, unable to decide if he wanted the fragments to glow again, or feared the moment they would. The physicist checked her instruments over and over, insisting something in the fragment's resonance had changed. The anthropologist held her notebook like scripture, terrified she might have miscopied the words revealed in sunrise. Even the local guides watched in silence, their faces shadowed with reverence and unease. Finally, the historian spoke. "We have seen something the world has not witnessed in 1,000 years. What we decide next will shape its future." The physicist nodded. "If this gets out, everything changes. Science, history, religion, everything." "And if we hide it?" the geologist asked. "We become the next link in a chain of secrecy." The anthropologist whispered the line revealed at dawn. "A kingdom of stone falls. A kingdom of light endures." She looked up. "Maybe this isn't about authority. Maybe it's about timing." Silence thickened. The older guide stepped forward. "The monks carried the stone until the world was ready. Now you must carry it until you are ready." It wasn't an instruction. It was a passing of responsibility. The historian opened the case, the fragments pulsing once, soft, approving. Their journey was no longer a discovery. It had become a duty. Before sunrise, they left the cabin behind. The air was sharp, the forest quiet, as if the world sensed what they carried. The historian walked first, the case secured to his pack, while the others followed in single file. No words were spoken. The morning felt too fragile for conversation. The guides led them toward a remote canyon, an ancient place they called the Whispering Passage. As they climbed, the first pale light spread across the mountains, turning the mist into ribbons of silver. When they reached the canyon entrance, the group halted. The stone walls seemed impossibly old, etched with faint marks worn down by centuries of wind. Then the geologist noticed something. A symbol, 3 rays branching from a single point, carved faintly into the stone. The historian's breath caught. The same sigil, the one on the fragments. The canyon narrowed into a deep corridor, its silence eerie and resonant. Every step felt amplified, as though the rock whispered each footfall back to them. At the end of the passage, the path opened into a wide basin surrounded by jagged stone. "This is the place," the elder guide said quietly. The historian removed the fragments from the case and placed them on a flat natural stone. Light fell across their surfaces, and they shimmered, not brightly, but with a soft, familiar hum. "They recognized this place," the physicist murmured. The anthropologist knelt beside the altar-like rock, tracing her fingers across faint ancient carvings on the surrounding walls. More Greek letters, more sigils, and then a line, barely legible. "Not all light is given. Some must be sought." The historian steadied himself. This was no random location. This was part of the Codex's path. The next piece of its journey had begun. They stepped deeper into the alcove, where the canyon narrowed into a shadowed chamber carved by time, or perhaps by human hands long forgotten. The historian's flashlight swept across the stone and caught faint carvings. Greek inscriptions, swirling diagrams, and at the center, the glowing sigil. The sapphire fragments hummed in response. "They're communicating with this place," the physicist whispered. The geologist pressed a hand to the wall. "There's a hollow space behind this cavity." "Another chamber?" the anthropologist asked, breath trembling. "Maybe," he said, "but sealed long ago." The historian set the fragments on a natural altar stone. As they touched the surface, the sigil on the wall brightened, not with sunlight, but with a pulse that felt like memory resurfacing. The hum deepened, resonating through the chamber. The wall symbols shifted in their light. What seemed random now formed a pattern, a map, a constellation of points scattered across Europe and the Middle East. The historian whispered, "These locations, they match documented sightings of the Codex. The Venetian vault, the Sinai monastery, the Cappadocian caves, the lost Thessaloniki chapter house. This is its route," the anthropologist said. "Its pilgrimage." The physicist added, "No, its instructions, path to follow." The historian touched the radiant sigil. "The Codex is guiding us." And then, as if confirming, the fragments pulsed once, soft, steady, deliberate. The glow faded from the wall, but the message remained. The journey was not finished. It was only beginning.